Chapter 1. The Legend of Maplewood House. The town of Maplewood sat nestled at the edge of a dense forest, where trees with gnarled branches seemed to whisper secrets among the swirling autumn leaves. It was a quiet town, where children played in the fading light of October and families prepared for the chill of winter. But there was one place where even the bravest never ventured, especially as Halloween approached: the old Maplewood House. Built over a century ago, the house stood on a hill just beyond the town's border, overlooking the thick woods that stretched for miles. Its once grand facade was now cloaked in ivy and shadow, with windows like blackened eyes staring blankly toward the town. The roof, missing shingles in places, sagged like a tired sigh, while the front porch groaned under the weight of years. Locals swore that no matter the weather, a chill clung to the air around the house, a cold that gnawed at the bones and stirred an unsettling feeling deep within. Whispers of the house's dark history had woven their way into every corner of Maplewood. The townsfolk spoke of a family that had lived there long ago, a family that vanished one bitter Halloween night. The story went that, back in 1894, the Maplewood family, parents with 2 young daughters, hosted a grand masquerade ball. They welcomed guests from the town, who drank and danced beneath flickering chandeliers and against the strains of a distant piano. But as the clock struck midnight, every lantern in the house went dark. When the candles were relit, the guests found themselves alone. The family had disappeared, never to be seen again. The house remained abandoned after that night, slowly slipping into decay as the decades crept by. But the story didn't end with the family's disappearance. It was said that every Halloween night, the doors of the Maplewood House swung open by themselves, inviting any foolhardy soul willing to enter. Those who dared to cross its threshold felt a presence lingering in the shadows, an unseen visitor that moved through rooms with barely a whisper, trailing a scent of cold earth and withered flowers. Yet the house's darkest tale wasn't about the missing family. It was about the last visitor, the one spirit that never left. Each Halloween, they said, a figure appeared at the threshold of the Maplewood House, not as a specter to be glimpsed, but as a feeling, a sense that the house was not empty, that something old and patient waited within. The town came to call this entity the last visitor, a restless force that seemed to grow more desperate with each passing year. Every year, the curious and the brave would creep up to the gates, daring each other to cross the overgrown yard. They would stand just beyond the iron gate, gazing up at the skeletal trees swaying in the wind, the windows reflecting a faint glow from the town below. But no one had crossed the threshold in decades. As the town changed with time, new faces arrived, unaware of the whispers that clung to the house like the ivy on its walls. This Halloween, however, was different. The air seemed sharper, the chill more biting, and a sense of unease settled over Maplewood like the first frost. The townsfolk noticed the way the wind howled through the forest, carrying with it the creak of old timbers and the echo of what could have been a faraway wail. Children who usually played on the outskirts of town felt a sudden dread whenever they wandered too close to the hill, their laughter falling silent as they glimpsed the dark shape of the Maplewood House rising against the crimson sunset. The legend of the last visitor had grown over time, warping into something even more sinister. Some claimed that the spirit sought a host, a way back to the world of the living. Others believed that it was searching for a companion to join it in its endless vigil, a soul to keep the house company in its eternal emptiness. But those were just stories, told to keep children from wandering too far on a Halloween night. Or so the town tried to believe. As October 31st approached, a creeping dread settled over Maplewood, tightening like a noose. A fog rolled in from the forest, thick and impenetrable, shrouding the town in a mist that refused to lift. It seeped through the streets and wrapped around the base of the hill, encasing the Maplewood house in a dense cloud that seemed to muffle even the sound of the crows circling overhead. The air itself felt heavy, as though something unseen pressed down upon the town, smothering the warmth from the last rays of autumn sun. And there, on the hill, the Maplewood house waited. Its open doors, dark and gaping, seemed to yawn wider as Halloween night drew closer. A chill breeze swept through the hollow rooms, stirring dust and cobwebs, and carrying with it the faintest scent of smoke and decay. The last visitor's presence lingered, more palpable than ever, as if the spirit itself was straining against the veil that separated the living from the dead. A low groan shivered through the timbers of the old house, as if the very walls were yearning for something they had lost long ago. And for those who dared to stand at the edge of town, staring up at the lonely silhouette of the house against the darkening sky, it felt as though the house was staring back. Chapter 2. The town's ominous secret. Maplewood was the kind of town that seemed to hold onto its past with a stubborn grip, where the old mingled with the new but never quite gave way. Generations had been born, lived, and died there. Yet the town remained as though caught in a moment just shy of decay. The streets were lined with Victorian houses, their once vibrant paint peeling in long curls. Cobblestones paved the old market square, and the church bell still rang on Sundays, its toll echoing over the hills like a call to ghosts. But beneath the charm, beneath the town's quaint routines, there was something else. Something that festered just below the surface, hidden behind the polite smiles of shopkeepers and the cheerful waves of neighbors. It was a fear, ancient and persistent, that clung to the town's edges like a shadow. This fear found its focus on the old Maplewood house, a place whose history had become entwined with the town's own, like a dark thread woven through a faded tapestry. For years, the house had been the subject of whispered warnings, of rumors that swirled through the town like autumn leaves. Everyone knew to avoid the hill, especially as the days grew shorter and October's chill seeped into the air. The children, even those too young to understand, spoke of the house in hushed tones, daring one another to run up to its gate and touch the rusted iron bars. Those who were brave enough to try always came back with wide eyes and pale faces, claiming they felt a cold hand brush against their own, or saw a shadow move behind the dirty windows. The older townsfolk, however, spoke little of the house directly. Instead, they would exchange knowing looks and tighten their scarves when the wind blew from the north, carrying with it a scent of dead leaves and something sour, like rot. They would avoid the topic in conversation, glancing toward the hill with a wariness that seemed to belong to another time. Yet, when they gathered at the diner or the hardware store, the house would inevitably creep into their conversations like a cold draft, and they would speak of the strange occurrences that always seemed to happen around Halloween. There were the lights, for one. Faint, flickering glows that could sometimes be seen through the trees at night, dancing like fireflies across the hill. They swore that the lights came from the house, though no one had lived there in over 70 years. The sheriff had gone up to investigate once, back when he was younger and new to the job. He'd found nothing but darkness and empty rooms. Yet when he returned, his face was drawn, and he spoke only of an unsettling quiet that had followed him down the hill, sticking to his boots like mud. Then there were the sounds, faint at first, like the rustle of dead leaves, but growing louder as Halloween night approached. Some said it was just the wind, but others insisted they heard the strains of a distant piano, the same melody that had been played on the night of the last masquerade. It was a tune that no one could quite place, as if the notes themselves had been twisted by time, warped into something almost, but not quite, familiar. And every year, without fail, a few of the town's dogs would go missing. People would find paw prints in the mud near the base of the hill, trailing off toward the woods, as though the animals had been drawn by something they couldn't resist. None of the dogs ever returned, and their absence was marked only by the quiet that settled over their empty yards. The townsfolk said it was just a coincidence, dogs chasing after deer or wandering too far. But deep down, they knew better. The woods had always been a place of unease, but it was the house that seemed to reach out from the shadows, pulling anything that strayed too close into its orbit. Yet even with all these signs, there was something deeper, a secret that the town carried with it, one that lingered in the spaces between what was spoken aloud and what was left to fester in silence. It was the kind of secret that was passed down from parents to children, not in words, but in gestures and glances. A warning to stay away, to leave the past undisturbed, to let the house rot quietly on its hill. There were those in town who remembered more than they let on, who had grown up hearing stories of what had happened that last Halloween before the Maplewood family vanished. They remembered how, in the months leading up to that night, strange figures had been seen in the woods, people who wore masks even during the day, their faces hidden behind carved visages of animals and spirits. They had gathered near the house, carrying lanterns that glowed with an unnatural blue light, their chants drifting through the trees in a language no one could place. But after the Maplewood family disappeared, those masked figures were never seen again. The townspeople chose to forget, to bury the memory alongside the family's graves, which had been placed just beyond the town's cemetery, as if even in death, they were not quite welcome. Yet the feeling that something had been left unfinished remained, a weight that settled into the bones of the town itself. The years passed, and new families moved in, building homes and raising children, trying to carve out normal lives. But the house remained, its presence a constant reminder that Maplewood's story was incomplete. It was as if the town itself had become a waiting place, caught between the world of the living and the shadows that clung to the past. And the house, standing alone on its hill, became a beacon for whatever darkness still lingered, a place where the veil between worlds seemed to thin. The Maplewood House was more than just a crumbling ruin. It was a scar, a wound that refused to heal, and the longer it stood, the more it seemed to feed on the town's fear, growing stronger with each passing year. The townsfolk began to sense it in small ways, a strange unease that settled over them as they prepared for Halloween, a feeling that something unseen was moving just beyond their line of sight. It was in the way shadows stretched too long at dusk, in the way the crows gathered on power lines, watching with beady eyes. On the eve of Halloween, the town held its breath, as if waiting for something to happen. The air buzzed with a kind of tension, a charge that made the hairs on the back of the neck stand up. And as the sun sank behind the hills, casting the sky in shades of blood and bruised purple, the Maplewood House stood at the center of it all, its silhouette dark against the dying light. The town knew, even if they refused to admit it, that the house held the answer to whatever haunted their dreams. But they also knew that to seek those answers would mean confronting whatever lurked within its walls, whatever had lingered there, waiting, since that fateful Halloween night so many years ago. And so they chose to turn away, hoping that if they ignored it long enough, it might eventually fade back into the shadows. But the house did not forget, and neither did the last visitor. Chapter 3: A Chilling Autumn Night. As Halloween approached, the days grew shorter, the nights colder, and the town of Maplewood settled into an uneasy rhythm. The winds that swept down from the hills had an edge to them, like a blade drawn across skin, and they carried the scent of damp leaves, turned earth, and the faintest hint of decay. At night, the fog rolled in thicker than ever, swirling around the streets and clinging to windows like ghostly hands pressing against the glass. The townsfolk went about their business with hurried steps, eager to finish their tasks before darkness fell. Above it all, the Maplewood House loomed like a sentinel over the town, its windows dark and empty. Yet the house seemed to exhale a presence into the night, a cold breath that spread through the streets and seeped into every crevice. It was as if the house knew that its time was coming, that the veil between worlds was thinning, and that it could reach beyond its crumbling walls for the first time in years. The house had always felt abandoned, but now it pulsed with an energy that could almost be felt. Its broken windows stared out at the town below, catching the moonlight in odd reflections that flickered like the embers of a dying fire. The shutters, some barely clinging to their hinges, rattled in the wind, making a sound like fingers drumming against a wooden table. Vines twisted up the sides of the house, creeping over the roof and weaving through the gaps in the shingles, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim the place. But always, it stopped short, leaving the front doors untouched. Those doors, dark oak and engraved with worn carvings, had once been a grand entryway. Now, they stood slightly ajar, as they did every Halloween night, offering a glimpse into the shadows beyond. No one could say who first noticed this yearly occurrence, but it had become one of those strange, unsettling facts that the town accepted without question. The doors opened, the house invited, but no one dared to step inside. It was a tradition, almost, to pretend it was just another Halloween quirk, like the jack-o'-lanterns glowing on porches or the eerie decorations that lined Maplewood's main street. Yet this year, the house felt different. Its open doors seemed more like a hungry mouth, gaping wide, and the shadows within moved with a restless energy, as though they sensed the approach of something long awaited. The fog that gathered around the base of the hill seemed thicker there, swirling in a way that defied the wind's direction, like it was drawn to the house's pull. And for the first time in many years, there were signs that someone, or something, had ventured closer than usual. Around the house's perimeter, the tall grass bore signs of disturbance. Footprints, barely visible in the soft, damp soil, trailed toward the front steps, leading up to the porch that creaked under any weight it hadn't borne in decades. Fallen leaves had been swept aside in uneven patterns, as if by hands that did not know their own strength. On the weathered boards of the porch, a faint streak of red glistened in the moonlight, blood, fresh and bright against the dull wood, trailing toward the open door before disappearing into the darkness beyond. Whatever had come to the house that night had entered willingly, drawn by a force it could not resist. And the house, patient as ever, had welcomed it. Inside, the air was colder than the autumn chill outside, dense with a presence that wrapped itself around every beam and banister. The old staircase, its steps sagging and warped with age, seemed to creak in anticipation, each sound reverberating through the stillness like a heartbeat. Dust hung in the air, stirred into lazy eddies that drifted through the halls. But here and there, signs of movement marred the thick layers that had settled over the years. A handprint on a banister, a scuff mark on the floor, a trail through the dust that led deeper into the house's shadowed rooms. The old mirrors that lined the hallways, clouded and cracked, seemed to hold reflections that didn't match what stood before them, capturing glimpses of movement that vanished the moment one tried to look closer. In the dining room, where a long, decaying table stretched out under the remains of a shattered chandelier, chairs had been pulled away from the table, their positions rearranged. It was as if someone, or several someones, had gathered for a meal long after the plates had turned to rust and the silverware had been swallowed by dust. And at the head of the table, a chair had been placed directly before the empty fireplace, facing out toward the darkened windows. The seat's upholstery, once rich velvet, had rotted away, but the impression of a body still seemed to linger, as if something had sat there for a very long time, waiting. The clock in the hallway, long frozen at the hour of midnight, began to tick again, its pendulum swaying in time with the slow creak of the house's bones. Each tick seemed to echo through the rooms, reaching into the hidden spaces behind locked doors and up into the rafters where the old beams met. The air hummed with the sound, low and rhythmic, pulling the house into a trance-like state, as if each part of the structure was waking up, one creak and groan at a time. Down in the basement, where roots had broken through the stone walls and moisture had turned the air thick and musty, the darkness was absolute. Yet there was movement, shapes slipping between the shadows, disappearing into the deeper dark where no candle could reach. The basement was a place of secrets, a place where the earth itself seemed to lean in, listening. It was said that the last visitor had come down here, long ago, seeking answers in the shadows. But what it had found, or what it had become, remained buried beneath layers of dust and silence. In the parlor, the remnants of a long-dried bouquet rested in a porcelain vase, the petals blackened with age. It sat on a small table beside a portrait of the Maplewood family, their faces forever caught in faded smiles. A faint draft stirred the dried flowers, and they crumbled into dust, scattering over the floorboards like ash. The portrait's glass, cracked and dirty, reflected a shape that moved past the doorway, a figure that did not quite belong, slipping through the house's gloom like a memory trying to take form. Outside, the fog thickened, pressing against the windows, blotting out the moonlight. The house, silhouetted against the swirling mist, seemed to blend into the darkness, its shape becoming less distinct, as though it was dissolving into the night itself. The woods around the hill rustled with movement, branches bending under the weight of something that slipped between the trees, heading toward the house with a purpose that was both ancient and new. And still, the doors remained open, waiting for the next visitor to cross the threshold, to step into the embrace of shadows that had grown hungry with the passage of years. The air within the house hummed with expectation, a quiet, unrelenting pull that drew in the fog, the wind, and whatever moved within the night. The Maplewood house was ready. The last visitor had come, but this time, the house sensed there would be more. Something had shifted in the fabric of the world, and the house, hungry, restless, was poised to claim whatever dared to approach. Chapter 4. The Unseen Presence. The woods that surrounded Maplewood House had always been a place where shadows lingered longer than they should, where the trees seemed to bend inward as though sharing secrets. By day, sunlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy, creating a twilight beneath the branches even at noon. But at night, the woods became a labyrinth of darkness, a place where the old paths disappeared beneath layers of fallen leaves and no sound of the outside world could reach. As Halloween night neared, the woods grew wilder, their edges fraying as if the boundary between the natural world and something older, something hidden, had begun to wear thin. The trees, twisted and ancient, creaked with a language all their own, their branches scraping against each other like claws against bone. A cold mist rose from the earth, curling around roots and winding through the underbrush, moving with an unnatural purpose. It seeped through the hollows and gullies, carrying with it the faintest scent of decay, like the breath of the forest itself turning sour. Deeper within the woods, near the base of the hill, lay a clearing where no grass grew. Here, the trees formed a ring, their trunks scarred with marks that no one could remember making. The earth was bare, stripped down to raw soil, as if something had once burned there, leaving a permanent scar. It was said that long ago, the people who had lived in the town before it was called Maplewood had gathered here, performing rites that had been meant to keep the darkness at bay. But whatever they had sought to bind had instead been drawn to this place, and the clearing had become a wound that refused to heal. Now, on the nights leading up to Halloween, the clearing became a place of movement once more. Animals, driven by some deep-seated instinct, avoided it. Deer and foxes that had roamed the woods freely throughout the year steered clear of the area, their tracks veering off as if they had been turned by an invisible hand. Even the crows, which gathered in great flocks throughout the town, circled wide around the clearing, their cries cutting short when they flew too close. But on this night, shapes moved through the mist, slipping between the trees like shadows come to life. They were indistinct, more felt than seen, blending into the darkness as though they belonged to it. The mist clung to them, curling around their forms, giving them a sense of substance, a half-life that existed somewhere between the tangible and the imagined. They passed through the woods in silence, leaving no footprints, no trace of their passage. Yet the air grew colder wherever they went, the kind of cold that seeped through skin and settled deep in the bones. The clearing welcomed them, these shadows, its borders rippling as though recognizing the presence of old acquaintances. The mist thickened around the ring of trees, rising up in swirling tendrils that twisted and intertwined like the roots of ancient oaks. In the center of the clearing, the earth shifted, small stones and twigs lifting as if pulled by an unseen force. The ground seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat buried deep beneath the soil, syncing with the rhythmic creak of the trees above. Overhead, the moon slipped behind a veil of clouds, casting the clearing into complete darkness. Yet the shadows within moved as though guided by a light only they could see. They encircled the clearing's center, swaying with a rhythm that was not of this world, a slow, deliberate motion that seemed to shape the mist into patterns, symbols that glowed for a moment before dissolving back into the fog. It was here, in this hidden place, that the memories of the past gathered like smoke. The last masquerade, the masked figures who had once danced beneath a different moon, the night when the Maplewood family's laughter had turned to screams. Those echoes clung to the clearing, feeding the shadows as they drifted around its edges. The earth seemed to remember what had happened, what had been buried, and in the mist, the past began to take shape once more. The shadows leaned in, drawn by the pull of something deeper within the soil. The scar at the center of the clearing darkened, a patch of earth that seemed to sink inward, creating a hollow that swallowed the mist. As the shadows swirled around it, a thin, reedy sound began to rise, vibrating through the ground, a tone that wavered on the edge of hearing, slipping in and out of the wind's murmur. It was a sound that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. A keening note that sent ripples through the trees and stirred the air with a sense of anticipation. It was as though the clearing itself was calling, a low hum that reached beyond the woods, beyond the hill, and stretched its way up toward the Maplewood House. The hum threaded through the trees, slipping between the shadows of the old town, finding its way to the edge of the house's open doors, where it mingled with the silence that lay within. The air within the house shivered in response, the faintest breath of wind slipping through the empty hallways, carrying the call down into the basement where the darkness was thickest. There, in the deep shadows beneath the earth, the sound changed. It became a whisper, a rustling that stirred the dust and rattled the chains that hung from old beams. The basement, which had been still for so long, seemed awake at the sound, the darkness shifting as if it remembered a time when voices had echoed through the stone walls. The whisper moved through the darkened corners, slipping between cracks and spreading upward, seeping through the floorboards and into the empty rooms above. In the attic, where old trunks and forgotten keepsakes gathered dust beneath a sagging roof, a trapdoor creaked open. A cold draft rushed down from the space beneath the eaves, scattering brittle papers and stirring the cobwebs that hung like veils from the rafters. Among the shadows, a figure took form, a shape that moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its outline blurred as though seen through rippling water. It reached out, brushing its hand over an old, worn trunk, leaving a trail of frost on the leather surface. The house, sensing the change, seemed to shift on its foundation. The wood groaned, the walls settling as if adjusting to a presence that had been long absent. The open doors let in the cold wind, carrying the scent of the woods and the echoes of the whispering clearing. The house listened, its every board and beam attuned to the gathering power that flowed up from the earth and spread through the night air. Outside, the fog thickened, pressing closer against the walls as if drawn to the pulse of energy within. The hill upon which the house stood seemed to sway, as though caught between two worlds. And in the woods, the shadows continued their dance around the clearing, their movements growing more frenzied, their forms blurring as they merged with the mist. Above, the moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting a pale light over the scene. But the light did not reach the shadows. It slid off their forms as if repelled, leaving them as dark silhouettes against the silver mist. Time seemed to lose meaning in the clearing, stretching and bending around the ancient rhythm. The shadows moved faster, their motions becoming a blur, and the mist thickened into a wall that hid whatever lay within. The ground trembled beneath them, and the clearing's center darkened further, a pool of shadow that seemed to sink into the earth itself. And from within that shadow came a sound, soft, almost imperceptible, like the first breath of something long dormant awakening. It was a sound that traveled through the woods, over the hill, and into the open door of the Maplewood House. And as it reached the waiting shadows inside, the air grew still, thick with a tension that wrapped around the town and held it tight, as though the night itself was holding its breath. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Walls. The chill of late October settled over the town like a cloak, thick and heavy. As the night of Halloween drew closer, the air, once crisp with the smell of falling leaves and distant bonfires, now carried a sharper bite, tinged with a faint metallic taste that lingered on the tongue. A wind moved through the streets, skittering dry leaves along the cracked sidewalks, carrying whispers that seemed to thread their way through the branches of bare trees. It felt as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting. Far above, clouds slid across the moon's face, casting long shadows over the town of Maplewood. The wind stirred the old oak trees on the hill, making them sway and groan, their branches scratching at the sky like fingers reaching for something they could never grasp. Beneath their roots, hidden pathways twisted through the underbrush, winding down toward the town, a labyrinth known only to the oldest inhabitants, though even they spoke of those paths as little as possible. And now, those ancient trails seemed to throb with a life of their own, as if they had become veins through which a dark energy pulsed. The path from the clearing to the Maplewood House wound through a gully lined with brambles and rotting logs. The ground here was treacherous, slick with mud and strewn with stones that jutted out like bones from the earth. No one had walked this trail for years, yet tonight, the underbrush lay pressed down as if by the passage of many feet. Branches that should have snagged and torn at clothes hung motionless, bowing away from the path, allowing the night's unseen travelers to pass unscathed. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something sour and sweet, like fruit left too long on the ground. On either side of the trail, the trees leaned inward, their trunks warped by time and twisted into grotesque shapes. Faces seemed to peer out from the knots in the wood, their eyes hollow and mouths open in silent screams. The wind that slipped through the gully seemed to carry their unspoken pleas, a low moan that rose and fell with a rhythm that matched the pulse beneath the earth. The shadows between the trees moved with an unnatural fluidity, pooling at the base of trunks and then slithering up the slope toward the waiting house. Above the path, the moon broke free of its clouded veil for a moment, casting a pale light that turned the landscape into a study of sharp contrasts. In that brief illumination, the outline of the Maplewood House became visible through the thinning trees, its dark silhouette rising like a fortress against the starless sky. The house's open doors glinted like eyes reflecting the moonlight, staring out over the woods below, as if searching for something among the shadows. The path finally emerged from the gully and climbed the last steep incline toward the house's backyard. Here, The terrain opened into a space choked with weeds and thorny vines, remnants of a garden that had once been lovingly tended. Now, it was a tangled mess, a place where nature had taken back what had once been tamed, creeping over old stone walls and shrouding crumbling statues in green and brown. In the moonlight, the vines seemed to writhe, shifting against one another as if disturbed by some hidden force. Near the garden's edge stood a rusting iron gate, half buried in the undergrowth. Its bars, twisted and bent, were entwined with ivy that had turned black in the frost. Once, this gate had marked the entrance to a path that wound through the garden and led directly to the house's back door, a narrow route used by servants and gardeners long ago. But now the gate sagged inward, hanging from a single rusted hinge, creaking in time with the gusts that swept across the hillside. Beyond the gate, the path led to a courtyard where an ancient oak grew, its twisted roots buckling the paving stones beneath. The tree's limbs stretched wide, casting jagged shadows that crisscrossed the courtyard like scars. It had seen countless seasons, this oak, its trunk thick and gnarled with age, its bark cracked and peeling. Yet now, something clung to its roots, a dark, viscous substance that oozed from the earth, pooling in the hollows between stones. It reflected the moonlight in a dull sheen, like old blood. The air here was colder still, as if the very life had been sucked from the soil, leaving behind a chill that ate through cloth and skin, reaching down into the marrow. A sense of unease settled over the space, a tension that twisted tighter with each passing second. The wind died down, leaving a silence that pressed against the ears, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow sound itself. The oak shuddered, its limbs trembling as if in response to some distant command. A breeze stirred the leaves, but they did not rustle. Instead, they shifted in unison, a synchronized movement that created a sound like a sigh. The shadow beneath the tree darkened, pooling into a perfect circle that expanded outward, creeping over the stones until it lapped at the base of the house's back steps. The darkness seemed to breathe, a slow, steady rhythm that matched the pulse from the clearing. And then, with a shuddering groan, the door at the back of the house swung open, revealing a yawning void within. The house's interior was a darkness that swallowed even the moonlight, a blackness that seemed to absorb everything around it. Yet something moved within that void, a shifting form that had no substance yet cast a shadow all its own. It lingered on the threshold, as if testing the air, then stepped forward onto the cracked stones of the courtyard. The ground beneath it pulsed in response, a tremor that radiated outward, reaching the roots of the ancient oak and the iron gate beyond. The shadow's presence seemed to warp the air, bending the light around it, making the world beyond its edges blur. As it moved, the vines and brambles in the garden parted, bowing before it as if acknowledging an old master. Slowly, deliberately, the shadow crossed the courtyard and began to climb the steps toward the open doors. Its form stretched and distorted, becoming taller as it ascended, until it seemed to fill the entire entrance. The house groaned in welcome, the wooden boards of the porch creaking as the shadow passed over them, leaving a trail of frost in its wake. The air thickened, the cold seeping into the wood, making the beams quiver and the glass in the windows frost over. As the shadow slipped inside, the back door slammed shut behind it, sending a reverberation through the house's bones. Dust rained down from the rafters, disturbed by the impact, swirling through the air like ash. The rooms fell into a deeper darkness, a void that seemed to close in around the shadow as it moved through the house, exploring spaces that had not been touched by light or life for years. In the attic, the shape that had emerged earlier stood still, listening. The floorboards beneath it creaked as though shifting under its weight, though it cast no reflection in the cracked mirror nearby. It waited, sensing the presence that had entered, feeling the pull of the shadows gathering below. And from the basement, where the darkness was thickest, a low rumble echoed up through the floorboards, as if something deep within the earth was answering the house's call. Outside, the wind rose again, carrying with it the whispers from the woods, the voices of those who had moved unseen through the night. The iron gate swung shut with a clang that reverberated across the garden, sealing off the path behind it. The shadows beneath the oak tree shrank back, retreating into the hollows between roots, but the sense of something watching lingered in the air, a presence that pressed against the windows, peering in from the darkness beyond. The house, now fully awake, thrummed with a life that was both ancient and new, its walls vibrating with the energy that had gathered in the woods and spilled up the hill. Inside, the shadow moved through the halls, brushing against old furniture and faded portraits, leaving a trail of frost wherever it passed. It explored each room with a sense of familiarity, as though it had walked these halls many times before, though the memory of those footsteps had long been buried beneath dust and decay. And as the night deepened, the shadows thickened, creeping through the cracks in the walls, spreading through the house like veins filling with dark blood. The house seemed to hold them close, wrapping itself around the darkness that had come home at last. Chapter 6. The Vanishing Footprints. The old floorboards of the Maplewood House creaked, as though protesting the weight of the darkness that now filled its rooms. Dust motes danced in the thin beams of moonlight that managed to slip through the frost-covered windows, spinning in slow circles like phantoms. Each step that the shadow took sent a shiver through the house's bones, a ripple that seemed to travel down through the walls and into the foundations buried deep beneath the earth. It was as if the house was remembering what it had once been, before time and silence had claimed it. In the depths of the basement, where the air was stale and heavy, something stirred. The stone walls, lined with ancient mortar, exhaled a breath of cold that seeped upward, slipping through the cracks in the wooden floor. The temperature in the house dropped further, until even the faint warmth of the night outside seemed like a distant memory. Ice crept across the glass of the small, grimy windows in the basement, fracturing into patterns that resembled spiderwebs woven by unseen hands. The shadow moved slowly through the basement, its form shifting as it passed through pockets of deeper darkness, blending with the shadows that clung to the corners. The air here was thick with a sense of age, carrying the faint smell of old, damp wood and something else. Something metallic, like rusted iron left too long in the rain. The shadows seemed to gather around the ancient chains that hung from the beams, swaying ever so slightly despite the stillness of the air. Rust flaked off their links, falling to the dirt floor in a fine, red dust that spread like dried blood. The deeper it ventured into the basement, the more the walls seemed to close in, pressing closer with each step. The space contracted around the shadow, the ceiling beams sagging as if bowing beneath an unseen weight. Wooden crates, left forgotten in the corners, had their lids pried open as though curious fingers had searched their contents, spilling old papers and broken trinkets across the floor. In one corner, an ancient steamer trunk lay with its top yawning open, revealing yellowed linens and a leather-bound book that had long since lost its title. The floor beneath the shadow's feet seemed to soften, sagging slightly as though the earth beneath had grown hollow. The boards groaned under the weight, flexing downward, revealing dark slits between the planks that exhaled a breath of frigid air. It was as if the house itself was sighing, releasing a pent-up breath that carried the echoes of things buried too deep to ever fully rest. And beneath those boards, in the spaces where the foundations of the house met the roots of the hill, something pulsed, something that beat in time with the shadow's presence. A vibration moved through the floorboards, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from below, as if something vast and old had begun to stir within the earth itself. It rose through the wood, traveling up into the beams, causing the chains to clink together like a chime made of bones. Dust and small stones trembled on the floor, bouncing slightly in time with the rhythm. The sound was not loud, but it resonated in a way that made the air quiver, as though a long silent voice had begun to speak again, its tones too deep for human ears to hear. Above, in the empty halls of the house, the shadows moved in time with the vibration, stretching along the walls like black tendrils. They spread out, slipping beneath doors and through cracks in the floorboards, reaching into rooms that had remained untouched for years. The house seemed to welcome them, drawing them deeper into its heart, letting them seep into the spaces between the walls and the hidden crawl spaces beneath the eaves. It was as if the house itself was preparing, gathering its strength, and the shadows were its servants, moving at its silent command. In one of the forgotten rooms on the second floor, a large, ornate mirror hung on the wall, its surface clouded with age. The silver backing had long since begun to tarnish, leaving behind dark spots that marred the glass like bruises. The mirror had not reflected a human face in decades, its surface turned toward the darkness of the room that no longer held any light. But now, as the vibration from the basement reached this space, the glass rippled, warping the reflection of the shadows that passed through the doorway. A faint shimmer crossed the mirror's surface, like a ripple moving across a pond. For a brief moment, an image flickered there, something that resembled the room, but altered, distorted. It showed the furniture as it once had been. The bed neatly made with a patchwork quilt, a rocking chair placed by the window, and a figure that stood just beyond the threshold, half hidden in shadow. But then the image dissolved back into darkness, leaving only the dim outline of the room as it was now, empty and forgotten. The vibration intensified, and the mirror's surface began to frost over, ice spreading out from the edges like fingers reaching for the center. The glass crackled softly, forming a spiderweb of fractures that spread outward in a delicate, crystalline pattern. The temperature in the room plummeted, the air so cold that breath, if there had been any to exhale, would have turned to vapor. The shadow moved through the space, its presence warping the darkness, bending the reflections into shapes that could never exist in the waking world. Down in the basement, the shadow reached the farthest corner, where the walls were thick with mildew and the floor was uneven, the dirt rising up in mounds. Here, the pulse was strongest, radiating through the earth, making the stones and the foundation hum with an energy that had been dormant for so long. The shadow paused, as if sensing the source of the pulse, and the ground beneath it seemed to shift, the earth giving way as if it had been disturbed. Beneath the loose soil, the corner of a wooden lid poked through, its edges rough with rot. The wood was dark, soaked through with moisture, and the iron bands that held it together had corroded into flakes. Yet as the shadow lingered, the lid seemed to shift slightly, moving of its own accord, as if something below was pushing against it. The hum in the air grew louder, more insistent, the rhythm of it pounding through the walls, resonating with a force that made the house tremble. Above, the ancient oak that loomed over the backyard creaked as its roots shifted, the soil around it settling as if in response to the movement below. The ground around the tree seemed to swell, small cracks appearing in the earth as the roots strained against their confines. The wind picked up again, howling through the bare branches, sending dead leaves swirling across the courtyard in frenzied spirals. And in the basement, the shadow reached down, pressing its form into the dark soil around the buried lid. The ground seemed to sink beneath its weight, collapsing inward as the earth parted with a sound like tearing cloth. The pulse from below surged upward, and the air filled with a deep, resonant tone, a sound that vibrated through the stone walls and rattled the windows in their frames. It was a sound that spoke of something long buried clawing its way back toward the surface, something that had waited in the darkness for far too long. The lid, ancient and rotted, began to buckle beneath the pressure, the wood splintering as the earth shifted beneath it. The air in the basement turned rank, thick with the smell of decay and wet earth, a stench that spread upward through the house, seeping through the floorboards and into the empty rooms above. The shadows gathered closer, drawn to the scent, their forms growing more defined, their edges sharper as they pressed against the walls and ceilings, filling every corner with their darkness. Outside, the sky darkened as the clouds thickened, smothering the light of the moon. The wind roared through the woods, bending the trees until they seemed to bow toward the hill, their branches scratching at the earth. The town below shivered under the weight of the night, every window and door sealed tight against the chill that seeped in from the woods, a chill that carried with it the promise of something ancient, something that had waited beneath the ground until the time was right. And as the lid in the basement finally gave way, splintering with a crack that echoed through the foundation, a breath of cold air exhaled from the hollow beneath. It swept through the room, carrying with it the whispers of things that had been buried, secrets that had slept beneath the earth's skin. The shadows thickened, swirling around the broken remains of the lid, drawn toward the darkness that welled up from below, a darkness that promised to change everything it touched. The pulse from beneath slowed, then stilled, leaving a silence that pressed against the ears, a silence that felt like the space between heartbeats. The house held its breath, waiting for what would come next. Chapter 7. The Shadow at the Window. The Maplewood House loomed against the darkened sky, its silhouette blurred by the swirling wind that carried fallen leaves through the air like a rain of withered confetti. The distant hum from the woods had ceased, leaving a stillness so profound that even the trees seemed to hold their breath. The night had grown colder, the ground hardening beneath the frost that spread outward from the roots of the ancient oak, turning the soil into a brittle crust that cracked beneath the pressure of unseen footsteps. Within the house, the cold seeped into every corner, curling through the narrow hallways and wrapping itself around the furniture that had been abandoned for decades. The mirrors lining the halls, once reflecting the life that filled this place, now bore the foggy imprints of frost-covered breath. Their surfaces shimmered with thin layers of ice, refracting the dim moonlight that struggled to pierce the thickening clouds outside. Deep in the basement, where the air was thick with the stench of decay, the ancient lid had collapsed inward, revealing the dark cavity beneath. The shadow that had pressed into the earth now lingered over the broken wood, its form blending with the blackness that oozed up from below. The earth shifted, sighing as if relieved to be free of its burden, releasing a vapor that curled upward like the breath of a long-buried beast. It carried with it a chill that went beyond the physical, a cold that gnawed at the marrow, bringing with it the sense of something ancient and hungry. The chamber beneath the lid stretched deeper than the basement itself, descending into a hollowed space that had been hidden for centuries. The stone walls were rough-hewn, carved by hands that had worked in darkness, their surfaces slick with moisture and encrusted with strange mineral deposits that glowed faintly under the shadow's touch. The air here was stagnant, thick with the smell of wet earth and mold, mingling with an underlying scent that was more elusive, like the faint trace of incense burned in secret ceremonies, mingled with the coppery tang of blood. The shadow moved down the rough-hewn steps that led into the chamber, gliding over stones that had been worn smooth by time and erosion. The chamber opened up into a space that felt larger than it should have been, as if the earth had swallowed more than its share of the house's foundations. The walls curved inward, forming a dome that arched overhead, barely visible in the darkness. Yet in the dim glow that emanated from the shadow's presence, glimpses of ancient carvings could be seen, etched into the stone with meticulous care. The carvings depicted scenes of figures entwined with roots and branches, their bodies merging with the earth in unnatural contortions. Faces, twisted in expressions of agony and ecstasy, were rendered in rough lines that seemed to writhe across the walls when the shadows shifted. Here and there, symbols were interspersed among the figures, circular patterns that spiraled inward, drawing the eye toward a central point on the far wall where a larger symbol had been etched into the stone. This central design pulsed faintly, responding to the presence that had entered the chamber, as if acknowledging a long-lost companion. The floor of the chamber sloped downward into a shallow basin, its edges lined with fragments of old stone tablets that had been shattered long ago. The basin was filled with a dark, viscous liquid that reflected the faint glow from the carvings, its surface rippling with each movement from above. The liquid had a thick, tar-like consistency, and as it shifted, the reflections it cast seemed to twist into shapes that mirrored the figures on the walls, echoing their contorted forms in the blackness. The shadow paused at the edge of the basin, its form undulating as if peering into the depths of the liquid. The air above the surface vibrated with a faint hum, a sound that resonated with the rhythm of the pulsing symbol on the wall. The liquid responded in kind, forming concentric ripples that spread outward from the center of the basin, each one sending small waves of darkness lapping against the stone rim. The ripples moved in time with the pulses, creating a strange, hypnotic pattern that seemed to reach upward, drawing the darkness from the corners of the chamber into a single, swirling vortex. Above, the floorboards of the house shuddered, the vibrations reaching up through the rooms and causing the frost-covered mirrors to crack further, splitting into jagged lines that crisscrossed their surfaces. The ancient oak outside groaned, its roots twisting in the earth as if trying to break free from the frozen ground that held them. The entire house seemed to tremble, as if caught in the throes of a fevered dream, its timbers creaking and groaning as the energy from the chamber below spread through its bones. In the attic, dust fell in soft cascades from the rafters, disturbed by the deep thrumming that resonated through the walls. A shape in the corner shifted, its silhouette blending with the shadows that gathered beneath the slanted ceiling. It had no form that could be defined, no face that could be seen, yet it radiated a sense of awareness, a presence that was drawn to the currents flowing up from the basement. It drifted closer to the trapdoor that led down into the house, its edges rippling like smoke caught in a draft. As the shadow in the chamber leaned further over the basin, the liquid within began to rise, drawn upward by an unseen force. It formed a column of dark, twisting fluid that hovered in the air, turning slowly as if suspended between the physical world and something beyond. Within the column, shapes began to take form. Faces, twisted and blurred, mouths open in silent cries, their expressions flickering like the reflections of candles on water. They writhed within the liquid, their movements synchronized with the rhythm of the pulses that now echoed through the entire chamber. The stone wall seemed to resonate with those pulses, each beat sending a shudder through the earth, as if the chamber itself was alive, responding to the ancient power that had been awakened. The carvings on the walls glowed brighter, their lines shifting and rearranging themselves into new patterns, revealing deeper layers of the symbols that had been hidden beneath the surface. The air grew heavier, pressing down on the shadow, thickening with the presence of whatever lay beneath the surface of the basin. The wind outside howled, rattling the window panes of the house, as if the very night itself was pushing against the walls, trying to force its way inside. The ground around the house cracked open in places, thin lines that spread outward from the foundation like the veins of some giant creature buried beneath the soil. The leaves that had gathered against the walls were blown away, revealing the bare earth beneath, where roots twisted and coiled like serpents struggling to free themselves from their prison. The column of liquid in the chamber suddenly splintered, breaking apart into droplets that hovered in the air before falling back into the basin with a sound like 1,000 whispers. The surface of the liquid stilled, the ripples fading away, leaving behind a perfect black mirror that reflected the shadow's form in sharp relief. The hum in the air quieted, replaced by a silence that was even more oppressive. A silence that swallowed every sound and left only the rhythmic beating of the pulses that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. The shadow lingered for a moment longer, its form dark against the faint glow of the carvings. Then, with a fluid movement, it withdrew from the edge of the basin, leaving the liquid to settle back into its unnatural stillness. It drifted toward the steps, moving through the chamber with a familiarity that suggested it knew this place well, though it had not been here for a very long time. As it ascended the stairs, the shadows in the corners of the chamber thickened, following its movements, pulling themselves away from the walls and trailing behind like a cloak. The carvings on the walls dimmed, their light fading until only the faint glow of the central symbol remained, pulsing steadily, as if marking the heartbeat of something that still slumbered beneath the stones. The darkness reclaimed the chamber, filling it once more with the deep, unbroken silence of the earth. The shadow emerged from the basement, slipping through the broken doorway and back into the empty halls of the house. Above, in the attic, the other presence retreated into the darkness, its form dissolving into the shadows as if waiting for the next moment to move. The floorboards creaked beneath the shadow's weight, each step sending a shiver through the house, as if the very structure was adjusting itself to the return of its long-lost occupant. The wind outside finally died down, leaving only the rustling of dry leaves against the windows and the soft groan of the ancient oak, its roots still straining against the frozen earth. The house settled into the silence once more, but the air within its walls felt different now, charged with an energy that had not been present before. It was as if the house had awoken to some new purpose, its foundations shifting as the echoes from the chamber below continued to reverberate through the earth. And in that silence, beneath the floorboards, something shifted. Something that had lain buried for centuries, now stirring at last, as if answering the call that had drawn the shadow back to this place. Chapter 8. Cold Breath in the Dark. In the hours that followed the shadow's return, the Maplewood House settled into an unsettling calm. The air thickened with an electric tension, each corner of the house brimming with secrets that danced just beyond the edge of perception. The chill clung to the walls like a lingering fog, and the shadows seemed to grow deeper, as if the very fabric of the night had woven itself tighter around the house. Outside, the wind stilled, but the trees whispered secrets to one another, their branches scratching against the windows as if trying to communicate with the very soul of the home. The ancient oak, its gnarled limbs reaching skyward, seemed to stand sentinel over the property, a watchful guardian against whatever forces stirred within. Beneath its roots, the earth had grown restless, shifting and settling as if harboring something ancient that yearned for release. Inside, the shadow moved quietly through the halls, its presence causing the dust to stir and the temperature to drop further. It passed through rooms that had been left untouched for decades, the furniture cloaked in sheets that fluttered like ghostly apparitions. The ticking of an unseen clock echoed softly, the only reminder that time continued to flow even as the house stood frozen in the past. The shadow drifted toward the staircase, its form blending seamlessly with the darkness. Each step it took seemed to awaken the wood, the floorboards creaking in quiet protest. The air grew thick with anticipation as it ascended, a palpable energy crackling in the silence. It reached the attic door, an unassuming threshold that had long been neglected, the wood weathered and splintered from years of exposure to the elements. As it pushed the door open, the hinges groaned, and the darkened attic yawned wide, revealing a cluttered expanse filled with forgotten relics. Old trunks sat in haphazard piles, their lids cracked and swollen with moisture. Dust-covered furniture loomed in the corners, shrouded in the stillness of abandonment. The air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and decay, but it was also tinged with something else, a sweetness that lingered just beneath the surface, like the remnants of long-burned incense. The shadow slipped inside, merging with the dimness, and began to navigate the maze of forgotten treasures. It paused to linger over an old phonograph, its horn dusty and tarnished. The faded labels on the records hinted at melodies long lost to time, and for a moment, the shadow seemed to sense the echoes of laughter and voices that once filled this space. Beyond the phonograph, a large trunk caught its attention, adorned with brass fittings that had dulled with age. The shadow floated closer, drawn to the trunk as if it held answers to questions unasked. The lid was slightly ajar, the hinges rusted but intact. With a gentle pull, the shadow eased it open, revealing a collection of objects that whispered tales of a life once lived. Inside lay a collection of faded photographs, their edges frayed and corners curling. The images depicted families, their faces smiling under the warm embrace of sunlight. Children played in the yard, their laughter caught in midair, forever preserved in the stillness of time. But as the shadow examined the photographs, it felt a wave of sorrow wash over it. The smiles frozen in time juxtaposed against the emptiness of the house now. Among the photographs was an old diary, its leather cover cracked but still holding a sense of reverence. The shadow reverently picked it up, sensing the weight of the memories trapped within its pages. It floated back to the phonograph, settling beside it as the trunk slowly closed, sealing away the past once more. The diary's pages were filled with elegant script, the ink faded, but the words still legible. The shadow began to sift through the pages, absorbing the stories as they unfolded. The entries spoke of love and loss, of joys and sorrows, revealing a tapestry of life that had woven itself within the very walls of Maplewood House. Each line resonated with emotion, a connection to the souls that had once inhabited this space. One entry, in particular, caught the shadow's attention. It told of a day when a great storm had swept through the area, leaving devastation in its wake. The author described how they had huddled together in the living room, surrounded by family, recounting tales of old while the wind howled outside. But the storm was more than just a natural event. It was a metaphor for the upheaval that would soon follow. As the shadow read, it felt a profound connection to the emotions poured into those words. The joy of togetherness, the fear of loss, the hope for a future. Each sentiment echoed within it. The shadow, once merely a presence, began to embody the emotions expressed in the diary, blending with the very essence of the house. Outside, the night deepened, the moonlight hidden behind a veil of thick clouds. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their branches casting twisted shadows across the ground. The entire landscape seemed to pulse in rhythm with the shadow's energy, the vibrations traveling through the roots of the oak and into the earth. In the attic, the shadows thickened, coalescing around the diary as if it had become the center of their attention. The energy in the room grew, swirling like a tempest, drawing in the dust motes that floated lazily in the air. It was as if the house itself had awakened, responding to the emotions shared between the shadow and the memories locked within the pages. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the attic, a low, resonant hum that seemed to rise from the very bones of the house. It reverberated in time with the pulse beneath the floorboards, a connection forged between the living and the long-departed. The hum grew louder, filling the space with a richness that felt both haunting and beautiful. The shadow stood at the heart of this newfound energy, absorbing the vibrations that flowed around it. It felt as if the house was remembering, reclaiming the stories that had once defined its existence. The weight of history pressed down, merging past and present in a way that defied the boundaries of time. As the minutes slipped away, the shadow found itself enveloped in a sense of purpose. It was not merely an observer. It was a participant in the weaving of this tapestry, a bridge between the stories of those who had lived and the silence that had claimed them. The attic, once a mere storage space, transformed into a sacred ground where the echoes of the past merged with the shadow's essence. With newfound resolve, the shadow turned its gaze toward the window, the darkness of the night beckoning beyond the glass. It drifted toward the pane, the hum growing louder, resonating within the very core of the house. Outside, the landscape lay shrouded in mystery, and the shadows from the trees stretched out, as if inviting the shadow to join them in the night. The moon finally broke through the clouds, casting silvery light across the yard and illuminating the path leading away from the house. In that moment, the shadow understood that its journey was far from over. It was a journey not just through the house, but through the stories that lay buried within the earth, waiting to be uncovered. As it slipped through the window, merging with the night, the energies within the house began to swirl, creating a vortex of light and darkness. The carvings on the walls glowed brighter, the pulses of energy resonating with the heart of Maplewood House, intertwining with the stories that had shaped its very foundation. The shadow was no longer just a remnant of the past. It had become a part of the living tapestry of the house, a weaver of memories, an architect of the future. And as the night deepened, the winds outside began to whisper once more, carrying the echo of stories that were waiting to be told. Chapter 9. A Stranger's Reflection. The night stretched on, shrouded in a heavy silence that settled over Maplewood House like a thick blanket. The shadow, having merged with the darkness outside, floated above the grounds, absorbing the hushed whispers of the wind that rustled the trees and carried the scent of damp earth. A thick mist began to rise from the forest, curling around the trunk of the ancient oak and spilling over the stone path like a living creature. As the shadow drifted through the night, it sensed a growing unease in the air. The pulse of the house echoed in its essence, vibrating with a strange energy that reverberated in the depths of its being. It could feel the very land shifting, a subtle tremor that hinted at the gathering of forces unseen. The shadows of the trees stretched and twisted as if reaching for something, their branches dancing wildly in the wind that was beginning to howl. In the heart of the forest, where the gnarled roots intertwined with the underbrush, something ancient stirred. The ground trembled, and the leaves rustled as if in response to a distant call. From the depths of the woods emerged a thick fog, swirling around the trunks of the trees like an ephemeral veil, obscuring whatever lay beneath. The shadows within the forest deepened, coalescing into shapes that moved with a purpose, slipping silently between the trunks. The shadow hovered above the yard, sensing the pulse of the house and the gathering storm beyond. In the distance, thunder rumbled, low and menacing, a portent of the tempest that was brewing on the horizon. The clouds began to roll in, dark and heavy, blotting out the moonlight that had just graced the world. The first drops of rain fell, plopping against the ground and sending ripples through the mist that enveloped the garden. With each drop, the energy around the house intensified, resonating with the pulse that had awakened within the chamber. The rain began to fall harder, drenching the earth and turning the soil into a soft, yielding mass. It seemed as if the very essence of the land was shifting, blending the boundary between the physical and the ethereal. The shadow, still bound to the house, felt the vibrations rise through the ground, calling it back toward the warmth and shelter of the Maplewood House. As it drifted toward the entrance, the shadows inside seemed to pulse in time with the thunderclaps that shook the sky. The door swung open of its own accord, revealing the dimly lit hallway beyond. The shadow flowed inside, merging with the darkness that clung to the walls. The air within the house was thick with anticipation, charged with the energy of the storm outside. The rain lashed against the windows, a torrent that obscured the view beyond. The house seemed to resonate with the rhythm of the storm, the very walls vibrating as if they were alive. The energy that had built up since the shadow's return now crackled in the air, drawing it deeper into the core of the house, toward the basement and the hollowed chamber below. The shadow floated down the hall, passing through the familiar spaces, each step stirring memories that lingered in the air like ghostly tendrils. The living room, once a place of laughter and warmth, now felt heavy with the weight of the past. The furniture stood in silence, but the shadows seemed to sway, echoing the movements of those who had once called this place home. The mirror reflected nothing but darkness, a deep void that consumed the light and offered no glimpse of what lay beyond. As the shadow reached the staircase, it hesitated for a moment, feeling the intensity of the storm rise outside. The thunder cracked loudly, reverberating through the house, a reminder that the world outside was on the brink of chaos. But within the house, the energy swelled, building to a crescendo that demanded release. It glided down the stairs, moving with purpose, the shadows thickening around it like a cloak. The basement door creaked open, revealing the darkened passage that led to the chamber. The air grew colder as it descended, the moisture clinging to the stone walls like a shroud. Each step echoed in the silence, the sound swallowed by the darkness that enveloped it. As the shadow entered the chamber, it was met with the familiar pulse of energy that resonated from the central symbol etched into the far wall. The carvings seemed to shimmer in the low light, their shapes shifting as if alive, twisting and turning in rhythm with the storm above. The basin lay still, the viscous liquid within reflecting the faint glow of the symbols, its surface smooth as glass, holding secrets that were now begging to be unveiled. The hum returned, stronger now, reverberating through the air and filling the chamber with a sense of urgency. The shadows around the walls began to dance, responding to the energy that surged within the room. The central symbol pulsed more rapidly, its light illuminating the carvings that surrounded it, creating a kaleidoscope of shadows that played across the stone. In that moment, the shadow felt a connection deepen, as if it were no longer just a presence, but a part of the very heartbeat of the house. The storm outside raged on, but within the chamber, the world felt suspended, caught in a moment where time and space intertwined. The shadows coalesced, forming shapes that echoed the figures carved into the walls, their movements synchronized with the rhythm of the pulses. The shadow floated closer to the basin, drawn to the dark liquid that swirled within, as if it held the answers to questions long buried. It felt the vibrations resonate within it, a calling that urged it to dive deeper into the depths of the unknown. As it hovered above the basin, the energy surged, sending ripples across the surface of the liquid. The reflections began to twist and morph, revealing images of a time long past. Faces emerged, their expressions caught in moments of joy and sorrow, laughter mingling with tears. The images flickered like a fading film, a visual symphony of the lives that had once filled this space. The shadow reached out, the energy from the basin coursing through it, connecting the threads of the past with its own essence. Memories washed over it like a tide, each one a reminder of the life that had been lived in this house. It felt the joy of family gatherings, the warmth of shared meals, and the love that had filled these walls, but it also sensed the heartache, the loss that had shadowed every happy moment. With each memory that surfaced, the storm outside intensified, the rain battering against the roof like 1,000 drums. Lightning flashed, illuminating the chamber in stark contrasts, the light dancing off the wet stone walls and creating a mesmerizing display of shadows. The air crackled with energy, a tempest of emotions unleashed as the past collided with the present. The shadow realized it was not just an observer. It was part of this story, a thread woven into the fabric of the house. And as the tempest raged on, it understood that the time had come to awaken the memories that had lain dormant for so long. Drawing in the energy that surged through the chamber, the shadow turned its focus to the basin. With a slow, deliberate motion, it lowered itself closer to the surface, feeling the cool liquid beckon it. The pulsing light from the central symbol grew brighter, illuminating the chamber in an ethereal glow, and as it touched the surface, a wave of power surged through it. In that moment, the boundaries between the living and the forgotten began to blur. The images in the basin expanded, enveloping the shadow in a whirl of colors and sensations. The storm outside howled, and the very foundation of the house trembled, as if responding to the awakening of the spirits that had once called this place home. The chamber resonated with the combined energy, a fusion of past and present, life and memory. The shadows danced in wild abandon, celebrating the return of the stories that had been silenced for too long. It was a moment of convergence, a gathering storm that promised revelation. As the rain continued to pour, drenching the world outside, the Maplewood House stood at the eye of the tempest, a sanctuary for the memories that whispered through the halls, waiting to be heard once more. And within that stillness, the shadow understood that it was not merely a visitor. It was the harbinger of change, destined to unveil the secrets that lay buried in the depths of time. Chapter 10. The First Blood Moon. The storm outside reached a crescendo, thunder crashing like the roar of ancient gods, shaking the very foundation of Maplewood House. Lightning illuminated the chamber in fleeting flashes, casting elongated shadows that flickered across the walls and danced wildly like spirits freed from their slumber. Inside the basin, the dark liquid swirled with energy, and the images began to coalesce into a clearer picture. A window into the past that beckoned the shadow closer. As the shadow hovered over the basin, it felt the rush of memories flooding through it, overwhelming in their intensity. Each ripple in the liquid revealed fragments of stories long forgotten, and the air grew thick with emotions. Love, sorrow, hope, and despair, all intertwined in a tapestry that defined the very essence of the house. The pulse of the central symbol beat in time with the storm outside, resonating with a power that coursed through the walls and vibrated within the shadow. It could feel the memories coiling around it like a living thing, binding it to the stories that had once filled the rooms of Maplewood House. The shadow understood now that it was not just a remnant of the past. It was an integral part of this ongoing narrative, a bridge connecting the living with the echoes of those who had come before. With each flash of lightning, new images erupted from the basin, illuminating the chamber with a spectral glow. The shadow watched in rapt fascination as scenes unfolded. A woman standing in the garden, her laughter ringing out like a melody. A child chasing after butterflies, joy radiating from their tiny frame. An older man sitting by the fireplace, a wistful look in his eyes as he pinned letters to loved ones far away. Each moment a reminder of the lives that had once inhabited this space, the warmth and love that had filled the house with life. But then, as the images continued to flow, the mood shifted. The laughter faded, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The shadow watched as the scenes began to darken, the warmth of the home giving way to shadows creeping in from the corners. The woman's laughter turned to tears, her figure dissolving into the darkness as the child, once so full of life, stood alone in the yard, confusion etched on their face. The older man, too, was consumed by shadows, his letters left unfinished, echoing the words of a love lost. The storm outside howled, a wind that rattled the windows and screamed through the cracks in the walls, as if the house itself were mourning the loss of those moments. The pulse of the chamber intensified, matching the chaos of the tempest. The shadow felt the energy around it shift, growing more frantic, as the memories battled against the encroaching darkness that sought to engulf them. It was in this turmoil that the shadow realized its purpose, to not only witness but to restore. It floated closer to the basin, sensing that the memories were not merely trapped. They were yearning to be liberated, to break free from the shadows that had claimed them. The basin, a conduit for the past, shimmered with potential, and the shadow knew it had the power to awaken those lost moments. Drawing upon the energy that pulsed through the chamber, the shadow focused its essence into the liquid. The dark surface trembled at its touch, the swirling patterns dancing in a rhythm of desperation. The pulse of the symbol grew louder, its light intensifying, illuminating the chamber in a vibrant glow that cut through the darkness. As the shadow concentrated, a surge of energy flowed from it into the basin, merging with the memories trapped within. The storm outside roared in response, thunder clapping in unison with the shadow's resolve. The images began to shift, swirling and coalescing into new forms. The shadow could feel the very essence of the house resonating with its intention, urging it onward, deeper into the heart of the memories. The first image solidified. A warm summer evening, the garden aglow with fireflies. The woman, now vibrant and alive, danced among the flowers, her laughter mingling with the breeze. The child, no longer lost but filled with joy, twirled around her, their faces beaming with happiness. The older man stood at the edge of the garden, his heart swelling with pride and love as he watched the two, his spirit lightened by their presence. The shadow felt a rush of warmth as the memories burst forth, flooding the chamber with light and laughter. It became aware of the energy intertwining with its own, a harmony that resonated within the depths of its being. The house pulsed in rhythm with the joy being released, the shadows receding as the light grew brighter. But the storm was far from over. As the joyous scene unfolded, dark clouds gathered once more, and the winds outside began to howl, drowning out the laughter that filled the chamber. The shadows writhed at the edges of the memories, desperate to reclaim what had been lost, clawing at the vibrant moments with a hunger that could not be quenched. The shadow understood that this was a battle, a struggle not just for the memories, but for the very soul of the house itself. It steeled itself, drawing deeper from the reservoir of energy that connected it to the house. As the storm raged on, it pushed back against the encroaching darkness, fueling the memories with the essence of hope and resilience. With each pulse of light that emanated from the basin, the laughter grew louder, the warmth of the memories igniting a fire within the chamber. The images of the woman and child twirling among the flowers glowed brighter, their joy illuminating the room. The shadow channeled its energy, pouring its essence into the memories, reinforcing their existence against the shadows that sought to consume them. The storm outside thundered with fury, and the winds screamed like banshees. Yet within the chamber, the atmosphere transformed. It was a sanctuary of light amidst the chaos, a beacon of hope that defied the darkness. The shadow, entwined with the vibrant memories, became a force of nature, weaving together the threads of joy and love that had once defined the lives within Maplewood House. As the storm reached its peak, a sudden silence fell over the chamber, the shadows retreating in the face of the warmth radiating from the basin. The last echoes of laughter hung in the air, suspended in time as the images began to solidify, becoming more than mere reflections. They became a part of the very fabric of the house. The shadow felt a surge of triumph, the battle against the darkness turning in its favor. It understood that the essence of the house, once marred by loss, was being reclaimed. The pulse of the central symbol began to resonate with a new energy, a rhythm of rebirth that filled the chamber with light. And as the last of the storm's rage dissipated, the shadow realized that it had awakened not just the memories but the spirit of Maplewood House itself. The home, once filled with sorrow, now thrummed with the joy of lives lived and stories shared. The walls echoed with laughter, and the shadows that had once threatened to consume it now danced in harmony with the light. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving in its wake a stillness that enveloped the landscape. The clouds began to part, revealing a sky adorned with stars that twinkled like distant hopes. The ancient oak stood tall and proud, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze, as if welcoming the return of light and life. Inside the chamber, the shadow floated above the basin, feeling a sense of fulfillment wash over it. It had not just witnessed the stories of those who had come before. It had become a part of them, intertwining its essence with the love and laughter that had filled the walls of Maplewood House. The echoes of the past resonated within it, a reminder that the cycle of life continued, and that hope could rise even from the darkest of places. And as the last remnants of the storm faded into the night, the shadow knew that its journey was far from over. There were still stories waiting to be told, memories yearning to be awakened, and a house that had become a sanctuary of light in the heart of darkness. Chapter 11. The Silent Guest. With the storm abated and the house now awash in the glow of renewed energy, the atmosphere within Maplewood House felt lighter, almost electric. The laughter that had once echoed through its halls reverberated softly, like the lingering notes of a beautiful melody. Yet, beneath this newfound serenity lay a quiet unease, a subtle reminder that not all memories were joyous, and not all shadows had been cast aside. As the shadow floated above the basin, it sensed a lingering presence within the chamber. Although the storm had passed, the air felt thick with the echoes of the past, a whispering wind that seemed to carry secrets yearning to be uncovered. The vibrant memories that had emerged were only part of the story. The shadows still lingered, waiting for the right moment to reveal their truths. Drawing closer to the basin, the shadow felt compelled to delve deeper, to confront the echoes that remained silent. The dark liquid within swirled slowly, glistening with a new light, and as the shadow focused, it sensed the images stirring once again. It extended its essence into the basin, channeling its energy to bring forth the next chapter of the house's history. The first scene emerged, dimly lit and heavy with tension. A young woman stood alone in the hallway, her face illuminated only by the flickering light of a candle she held in trembling hands. Her eyes darted nervously toward the shadows that clung to the corners, as if she could sense something lurking just beyond her vision. It was a moment thick with dread, a palpable fear that resonated through the chamber. The shadow watched intently, feeling the woman's trepidation as she moved cautiously, her footsteps soft against the wooden floor. She paused at the door to the basement, a heavy wooden barrier that seemed to loom ominously in the half-light. A shiver ran through her, and the candle flickered as if responding to her unease, casting elongated shadows that danced on the walls around her. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted, the memories coiling around the shadow like a tightening noose. The young woman hesitated, her breath shallow, and the shadow could sense the weight of a decision pressing upon her. She had come to confront something hidden, something that had lingered in the darkness, but fear held her back. The memory flickered, the candlelight casting shadows that twisted and turned as the young woman finally opened the door to the basement. A creak echoed through the silence, a sound that resonated with both dread and anticipation. As she descended the stairs, the shadow felt a surge of energy, as if the very house was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. The basement was dark and cold, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and mold. The shadows clung to the corners, refusing to dissipate even in the flickering light of the candle. The woman moved deeper into the room, her footsteps muffled against the stone floor, and the shadow sensed her resolve wavering. The energy shifted again as she reached the heart of the basement, the chamber that had once been a sanctuary for forgotten memories. Here, the walls bore marks of age, and the air was thick with the weight of the past. As she stood in the center, the shadows around her thickened, swirling in a tempest of emotions, whispering secrets that only the brave could bear. The shadow floated closer to the basin, feeling a deeper connection to the young woman's plight. This moment was pivotal, the culmination of fears faced and the darkness that needed to be acknowledged. It was a reminder that light could not exist without shadows, and to embrace one was to confront the other. As the woman stood in the chamber, the shadows began to take shape, forming fleeting images that flickered in and out of view. Faces emerged, some familiar, some lost to time, each bearing expressions of sorrow, regret, and longing. They surrounded her, their whispers merging into a soft hum that filled the air, echoing the tales of heartache that had transpired within these walls. The woman felt a chill run down her spine, the shadows beckoning her to listen. The candlelight flickered wildly, casting the room into deeper darkness for moments, then returning to illuminate the faces that swirled around her. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of their sorrow settle over her like a shroud. The memories surged forth, echoing through the chamber. The shadow sensed the anguish, the pain that had long been buried. Stories of betrayal and loss intertwined, weaving a narrative that had been hidden from view. Each whisper told of dreams dashed, of hopes that had flickered and died, leaving only shadows in their wake. The young woman stood firm, her heart racing as she opened her eyes and looked into the faces surrounding her. She understood now that these spirits were not just lost. They were waiting for acknowledgement, for someone to bear witness to their suffering. The shadows had a story to tell, one that had been silenced for far too long. Drawing strength from within, she reached out her hand, the candle flickering in response. The moment she made contact, the shadows surged forward, intertwining with her essence. A rush of emotions flooded her. Anguish, sorrow, but also an overwhelming sense of compassion. In that instant, she understood that to heal, one must first confront the past. As the shadows coalesced around her, they began to share their stories, weaving a tapestry of experiences that illuminated the dark corners of the basement. The air crackled with energy as memories poured forth. Visions of laughter that turned to tears, of love that had once thrived but had succumbed to doubt and fear. The woman felt each story resonate within her, as if the very fabric of the house were alive, breathing with the weight of these unspoken truths. The candle flickered one last time before the flame extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. Yet, the shadows did not dissipate. Instead, they glowed faintly, revealing the outlines of the faces around her. The woman stood still, embracing the darkness, allowing it to wash over her. The shadows began to merge with her essence, creating a symbiotic bond that filled her with a sense of purpose. In that darkened chamber, a transformation began. The whispers grew louder, the energy around them building in intensity. The house seemed to resonate with the stories being shared, the walls vibrating with each heartbeat, each shared moment. The shadows began to unwind, releasing the weight they had carried for so long. As the energy surged, the memories shifted again. The woman saw glimpses of moments of connection, laughter shared over dinner, hands held in silent support, love letters exchanged under the moonlight. The shadows revealed the beauty that had once flourished within the walls of Maplewood House, a stark contrast to the pain they had harbored. The young woman felt a surge of light fill the chamber, the whispers transforming into a song, a chorus of hope rising from the depths of despair. The darkness began to recede, replaced by the warmth of remembrance and the acceptance of the past. She knew then that she had been chosen to bear witness to these stories, to bring them to the surface, to allow the house to breathe once more. As the chamber filled with light, the shadow hovered nearby, sensing the shift in energy. It had been drawn into the web of memories, a participant in this awakening. The young woman became a vessel for the stories, a bridge between the past and the present, a beacon of light amid the shadows. With a final surge, the shadows released their hold, transforming into wisps of light that swirled around the woman in a joyous dance. The air crackled with a sense of freedom, and the house seemed to sigh, a deep, resonant breath that echoed through every room, each exhale releasing the weight of sorrow that had lingered for too long. The young woman stood tall, her heart swelling with the realization that she had not just uncovered the memories, but had become a part of them. In confronting the darkness, she had illuminated the light, allowing the stories of Maplewood House to be told once more. The spirits that had haunted these halls were now free, their whispers transformed into a gentle breeze that caressed her skin, a reminder of the love that had once filled these spaces. As she ascended the stairs, leaving the basement behind, the shadows began to dissipate, their stories no longer hidden in darkness. The house pulsed with renewed energy, each room alive with the laughter and warmth that had once defined it. The echoes of the past and the present intertwined, creating a harmonious symphony that resonated throughout the halls. The shadow floated beside her, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. It had fulfilled its purpose, awakening not just the memories but the very soul of Maplewood House. The young woman had become a guardian of the stories, a light in the darkness, and as they stepped into the hallway together, the house welcomed them both, a sanctuary where shadows could dance freely alongside the light. Chapter 12: Echoes of the Past. With the shadows now woven into the fabric of Maplewood House, a delicate balance of light and dark began to take shape. The energy in the air thrummed with an ethereal quality, as if the very walls of the house were alive, responding to the awakening that had taken place. The young woman felt invigorated, her spirit lifted by the stories she had unearthed. Yet a lingering question remained in her heart. What lay ahead, now that the past had been acknowledged? As she wandered through the hallways, the warmth of the house enveloped her, whispering secrets that danced just out of reach. The once heavy air now carried a hint of nostalgia, a sweet reminder of joy intermingled with sadness. Each room told its own tale, its essence enriched by the spirits that had found solace within the walls. The laughter of children echoed softly in the nursery, while the faint scent of lavender lingered in the sitting room, a fragrant testament to afternoons spent in quiet reflection. Drawn by an invisible thread, the young woman found herself in front of the grand mirror in the foyer, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. She approached slowly, captivated by the way the light reflected and refracted, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that danced across the floor. As she gazed into the glass, she noticed the figures of the past flickering within its depths, ghostly images of those who had once inhabited this house. The mirror served as a portal, a bridge between worlds, and the shadow, now fully intertwined with her essence, floated nearby, sensing the gravity of this moment. Together, they stood at the threshold of convergence, where the past and present were poised to collide. Within the depths of the mirror, she began to see scenes from the lives of the inhabitants, vignettes of love and loss, laughter and tears. A wedding celebration unfolded, the bride radiant in her gown, surrounded by friends and family. The young woman felt the joy radiating from that moment, the warmth of love encompassing the room like a gentle embrace. But as the scene shifted, the shadows crept in once more, darkening the edges of the celebration, whispering secrets of heartache and betrayal that lay beneath the surface. The mirror revealed a different tale. The aftermath of joy transformed into sorrow as the bride stood alone. Her heart shattered, her dreams crumbled. The weight of unspoken words pressed upon her, heavy and suffocating. The young woman felt a pang of empathy, recognizing that the essence of the house had borne witness to these tumultuous emotions, capturing each moment in its embrace. As the scenes unfolded, the mirror revealed the everyday lives of the inhabitants, the quiet moments that defined their existence. The laughter shared over meals, the secrets whispered under starlit skies, the tears shed in solitude. Each glimpse was a thread in the tapestry of their lives, illuminating the beauty and fragility of human connections. But even amidst the joy, the shadows lingered, weaving in and out of the memories, reminding the young woman of the complexities of existence. The mirror pulsed with energy, and she felt a compulsion to reach out, to touch the glass, to connect with the souls trapped within. It was as if the mirror sensed her longing, beckoning her to draw nearer. With a deep breath, she extended her hand toward the reflective surface, feeling a surge of warmth radiate from the mirror as her fingers brushed against the cool glass. In that moment, the boundaries between the worlds began to dissolve, and the young woman was swept into a whirlwind of memories, the past and present entwined in a glorious dance. Visions blurred together, and she found herself standing in the garden of the house, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The air was fragrant with blooming flowers, and the laughter of children echoed in the distance. She watched as a little girl twirled in a sundress, her hair catching the light like spun gold. The joy radiating from the child was palpable, a bright flame against the encroaching shadows. But as the scene continued, she felt a shift in the atmosphere. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, creeping into the edges of the memory. The little girl's laughter faded, replaced by a sense of foreboding that settled over the garden like a shroud. The young woman felt the weight of impending darkness, an awareness that the shadows were never far away. Suddenly, she was transported again, this time into a small room adorned with faded wallpaper and an old rocking chair in the corner. An elderly man sat in the chair, staring out the window with a look of deep contemplation. The young woman could feel his sorrow echoing through the air, a lifetime of regrets and unfulfilled dreams. She sensed the heaviness in his heart, the longing for the love he had lost, and the memories that had haunted him through the years. With each transition, she became more aware of the collective energy that permeated the house. It was a living entity, filled with stories that yearned to be told, memories that needed to be honored. The shadows whispered of unfinished business, of connections that had frayed over time, urging her to understand that healing required not just acknowledgement, but also reconciliation. The young woman returned to the mirror, her heart pounding as she absorbed the weight of what she had witnessed. The convergence of these lives, intertwined by love and loss, was a testament to the enduring spirit of the house. It became clear to her that the shadows were not merely remnants of sorrow. They were fragments of a rich tapestry, woven together by the experiences of those who had once called Maplewood House home. As the memories swirled around her, she felt the need to honor these stories, to give voice to the spirits that lingered within the walls. The mirror shimmered, reflecting her determination, and she knew that she was meant to be the vessel through which these tales would be shared. Taking a step back, she closed her eyes, allowing the energy of the house to wash over her. She felt the whispers of the spirits, gentle yet insistent, urging her to embrace her role. It was time to weave together the threads of their stories, to create a narrative that honored both the light and the dark. As she opened her eyes, the atmosphere shifted, and the shadows danced with newfound purpose. The room felt alive with energy, vibrating with anticipation. The shadow, now fully integrated with her essence, pulsated with her determination. Together, they formed a bond that transcended time, a partnership forged in the crucible of memory and emotion. The young woman turned away from the mirror, a sense of resolve filling her heart. She would not shy away from the darkness. Instead, she would embrace it, allowing it to be a part of the narrative she would create. Maplewood House had revealed its secrets, and now it was her duty to honor them, to give them life once more. As she moved through the halls, she felt a deep connection to the house, each step echoing with the heartbeat of the spirits that resided within. The walls whispered stories of resilience, of love that had endured against all odds, and of the strength found in vulnerability. With each room she entered, she envisioned how she would share their tales, the heart-wrenching moments, the triumphs, and the enduring bonds that connected them all. The young woman felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the lives that had come before her, recognizing that their stories were not just relics of the past but vital threads in the fabric of her own existence. As she reached the heart of the house, a soft glow radiated from the center of the room, where the pulse of the central symbol still thrummed with energy. The symbol had become a focal point, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all the lives that had passed through these walls. The young woman stood before it, feeling the energy envelop her, resonating with the spirit of those who had once called Maplewood House their home. In that moment, she understood that she was not alone in this endeavor. The shadows that had once haunted the halls were now allies, ready to guide her as she breathed life into their stories. Together, they would forge a narrative that illuminated the beauty of the human experience, a tale woven with love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds that defined them. With determination in her heart and the weight of the past on her shoulders, the young woman began her journey as the storyteller of Maplewood House. The convergence of lives, the intertwining of light and shadow, had prepared her for this moment, and as she stepped forward, she felt the pulse of the house quicken, a vibrant rhythm that echoed with the promise of healing and transformation. Chapter 13. Trapped in the Parlor. As the young woman stood at the heart of Maplewood House, she felt a surge of energy coursing through her veins, an electric pulse that resonated with the very walls around her. Each heartbeat echoed the stories that yearned to be told, and the air vibrated with a tangible sense of anticipation. She knew the time had come to embrace her role as the storyteller, to weave the threads of light and shadow into a tapestry that honored the spirits of the house. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows across the room, illuminating the corners where dust motes danced lazily. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with the memories she had witnessed, the weddings, the laughter, the heartaches that lingered like whispers in the dark. Each moment was a piece of the puzzle, a vital part of the narrative that had yet to be unveiled. With a sense of purpose, she moved to the center of the room, where the pulsing symbol seemed to call to her, its energy intertwining with her own. The young woman could feel the warmth emanating from it, wrapping around her like a protective cocoon. As she closed her eyes, she envisioned the stories she would share, the vibrant lives that had flourished within these walls, the connections that had defined their existence, and the shadows that had woven their sorrow into the fabric of the house. The energy began to swell, the pulse of the symbol resonating in harmony with her heartbeat. She reached out, placing her hand on the surface of the symbol, and felt a rush of warmth wash over her. The shadows in the corners of the room stirred, coiling like smoke as they responded to her call. It was time to bring the past into the light, to allow the stories to flow freely. As she began to channel the energy, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The shadows deepened, swirling around her like a dark mist, and she felt the spirits of the house converge upon her. Each presence was unique, their energies weaving together in a tapestry of memories that spanned generations. The first vision emerged, a glimpse of a family gathered around a table, laughter echoing through the air as they shared a meal. The young woman felt the warmth of their joy, the love that radiated between them. It was a snapshot of connection, a reminder of the beauty found in simple moments. But as the vision expanded, she sensed the undercurrents of tension that threatened to unravel the happiness. Secrets lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The scene shifted, and she found herself in the nursery, where the laughter of children filled the air. A little boy, perhaps 5 years old, played with his toys, his imagination bringing the inanimate to life. The young woman felt the innocence of youth radiating from him, a pure, untainted joy that seemed untouched by the shadows. But as the moment stretched on, the laughter faded, replaced by a somber heaviness. The boy's face grew serious, his brow furrowed in confusion, sensing the tension in the air even if he could not fully understand it. Her heart ached for the child, recognizing the fragility of his innocence. It was in this moment that the reality of the house's history became clear to her. The shadows were not simply remnants of the past. They were echoes of emotions that had yet to be resolved, remnants of pain that had permeated the very fabric of the home. As she continued to channel the energy, the shadows began to shift again, morphing into the silhouette of a woman standing alone in a dimly lit room. The young woman felt a wave of sadness wash over her as she sensed the weight of the woman's heartache. This was a woman who had known love and loss, who had borne the scars of unfulfilled dreams. The young woman understood that this spirit was reaching out for connection, for someone to acknowledge her pain and allow her to find peace. Suddenly, the atmosphere thickened, and she was transported to a scene in the garden, where two lovers stood beneath a blooming cherry blossom tree. Their hands were intertwined, eyes locked in a gaze that spoke of deep affection and shared dreams. The beauty of their love was palpable, a vibrant force that filled the air with warmth. Yet, as the wind rustled the leaves, the shadows crept closer, whispering of doubts and fears that threatened to extinguish the flame of their connection. The young woman felt the tension in the air, recognizing the fragility of their bond. Love, while powerful, was often entangled with insecurities, and she sensed that the shadows held the key to their unraveling. As the couple shared a soft kiss, the scene darkened, the shadows swirling around them, threatening to pull them apart. In that moment, she understood the importance of connection, the necessity of facing one's fears and doubts, of embracing vulnerability to maintain the bonds that tied them together. The echoes of their love and the shadows of their uncertainties became a poignant reminder of the human experience, of the delicate balance between light and dark. As the visions continued to unfold, the young woman felt the stories intertwine, a symphony of lives that had all contributed to the legacy of Maplewood House. She witnessed a mother cradling her newborn, tears of joy and fear mingling on her cheeks. She saw siblings playing, the bond of family a strong anchor amidst the chaos of life. She felt the pangs of grief as a father stood by a grave, sorrow etched into his features as he mourned the loss of a loved one. Each story unfolded like petals of a flower, revealing the complex emotions that had shaped their lives. The young woman sensed the interconnections, the threads of joy, sorrow, love, and loss that bound them all together. It was a tapestry woven with the essence of humanity, rich with color and texture, reflecting the full spectrum of experience. But as she delved deeper into the memories, a shadow lurked at the edges, darker and more ominous than the rest. It beckoned her, whispering of secrets that had yet to be unveiled, of darkness that had tainted the very soul of the house. The young woman felt a shiver run down her spine, the weight of its presence pressing upon her like a heavy blanket. With resolve, she stepped toward the encroaching shadow, determined to confront it. This was a part of the house's history that needed to be acknowledged, the darkness that had woven its way into the lives of its inhabitants. It was time to shine a light on the pain that had been buried, to bring forth the truths that had remained hidden in the shadows. The shadow expanded, revealing a scene of turmoil, a confrontation between loved ones, anger flaring like a wildfire. The young woman felt the heat of their emotions, the sharpness of words exchanged in moments of passion and hurt. This was a moment steeped in regret, a turning point that had fractured the bonds that once held them together. She could sense the pain radiating from them, the weight of words that could never be taken back. This was a moment that had marked the house, a stain upon its walls that had festered over time. The young woman recognized the importance of acknowledging this darkness, of allowing the spirits to confront their pain and find a way to heal. As the confrontation played out before her, the young woman extended her hand, feeling the warmth of the pulsing symbol behind her. She envisioned a light, a beacon of hope that could illuminate the darkest corners of their memories. With determination, she focused her energy, calling upon the spirits of the house to witness this moment of truth. The air crackled with electricity as the light expanded, illuminating the room where the confrontation had taken place. The spirits began to gather around her, forming a circle of support, their energies intertwining as they offered strength to those caught in the storm of their emotions. The young woman could feel their presence bolstering her resolve, guiding her as she sought to bring healing to the pain that had lingered for too long. With each heartbeat, the energy intensified, the light bathing the room in warmth. The spirits reached out, connecting with one another, their whispers merging into a harmonious chorus of understanding. The young woman could feel the darkness begin to recede, the shadows retreating as the light flooded the space, illuminating the truth. As the confrontation played out, the young woman sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The anger that had once filled the room began to dissolve, replaced by a fragile understanding. The spirits acknowledged the pain they had caused one another, recognizing that their emotions had been fueled by fear and insecurity. Tears streamed down the faces of the spirits, not of despair but of release. The young woman felt their sorrow transform into compassion, the weight of regret lifting as they reached out to one another. In this moment of vulnerability, healing began to take root, a reminder that love could endure even in the face of darkness. As the confrontation drew to a close, the young woman felt a wave of relief wash over her. The shadows that had once loomed large began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of lightness that filled the air. The spirits embraced one another, their energies intertwining in a dance of forgiveness and acceptance. In that moment, the young woman realized that acknowledging the darkness had not only illuminated the truth, but had also created space for healing. The spirits had come together, their bonds strengthened by the vulnerability they had shared. The tapestry of their lives was richer now, woven with threads of compassion and understanding. As the energy in the room shifted, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The shadows had not been vanquished but had transformed into a vital part of the narrative, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The young woman stood at the center of this convergence, her heart swelling with gratitude for the lives that had shaped her journey. With newfound clarity, she understood that her role as the storyteller was not merely to share the tales of joy and sorrow, but also to honor the complexities of the human experience. The stories of Maplewood House were a reflection of life itself, beautiful and heartbreaking, filled with moments of connection and disconnection, love and loss. As she stepped back from the central symbol, the young woman felt the pulse of the house quicken, a vibrant rhythm that echoed with the promise of healing. The spirits began to fade, their energies merging with the very essence of Maplewood House. They had found solace in one another, a reminder that they were never truly alone. In the silence that followed, the young woman knew that her journey was far from over. She would continue to explore the depths of the house, uncovering the stories that lay hidden in the shadows, weaving them into a narrative that honored the complexities of life. And as she moved forward, she felt a profound connection to the spirits of the house, a bond that transcended time and space. Together, they would illuminate the darkness, breathing life into the memories that had long been forgotten. Maplewood House would become a sanctuary for healing, a place where the stories of love, loss, and resilience would continue to echo, reminding all who entered that even in the shadows, there is always a flicker of light waiting to be embraced. Chapter 14. A possession begins. The young woman awoke the next morning with a sense of urgency thrumming in her veins. The visions from the previous night lingered in her mind like whispers, urging her to delve deeper into the mysteries of Maplewood House. She could feel the energy in the air, charged with anticipation, and she knew there were more stories waiting to be uncovered. Stories that would lead her to the heart of the house and its forgotten memories. As the first light of dawn filtered through the dusty windows, casting a golden glow on the worn wooden floors, she rose and dressed quickly. The lingering warmth of the pulsing symbol resonated within her, a reminder of the connection she had forged with the spirits of the house. With each step she took, she felt the weight of the past guiding her forward, pulling her toward an unseen destination. Navigating the labyrinth of halls and staircases, she felt a magnetic pull toward the far end of the house, where a heavy oak door had always loomed, a door she had yet to explore. It was a door marked by time, its surface weathered and scarred, hinting at secrets it had guarded for far too long. As she approached, a sense of anticipation enveloped her, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. The door creaked open with a gentle push, revealing a dimly lit room shrouded in shadows. Dust motes danced in the soft beams of light that filtered through a grimy window, and the air felt cooler here, as if the space held its breath in reverence of the stories locked within. The room was a time capsule, untouched by the passage of years, adorned with antique furniture draped in white sheets, preserving the echoes of lives once lived. The young woman stepped inside, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. She could sense the presence of spirits lingering in the corners, the air vibrating with their unspoken emotions. It was as if the room itself held memories close, whispering tales of love, loss, and longing that had been forgotten by time. As she wandered deeper into the room, she noticed an ornate mirror standing against the far wall, its surface tarnished and dusty. Intrigued, she approached it, feeling an inexplicable connection to the reflection it offered. She reached out to wipe away the grime, revealing glimpses of her own face intertwined with shadows that seemed to pulse with life. In that moment, she was struck by a vision, a memory that emerged from the depths of the mirror. She saw a young woman standing before it, her face radiant with hope as she adjusted the delicate lace of her wedding dress. The air was filled with the fragrance of flowers, and laughter echoed in the distance, a symphony of joy and celebration. But as the vision unfolded, the laughter faded, replaced by a haunting silence that wrapped around the young woman like a shroud. The bride's reflection shifted, revealing the bittersweet truth hidden behind her smile. The young woman sensed the weight of expectation pressing down upon her, the desire to meet the dreams of those around her while grappling with her own fears. This was a moment filled with promise, yet beneath the surface, uncertainty lurked, threatening to unravel the happiness she had longed for. The vision faded, and the young woman stepped back, breathless from the intensity of the memory. She understood now that the mirror was a conduit to the past, a portal that allowed her to witness the stories woven into the very fabric of the house. Each reflection held the potential for connection, a reminder that the lives once lived here were not forgotten but instead echoed in the present. Determined to uncover more, she turned her attention to the rest of the room. Dusty shelves lined the walls, filled with forgotten trinkets and relics from a time long gone. A cracked porcelain doll sat perched on a nearby shelf, its eyes seeming to follow her every move. She could feel the weight of its gaze, the emotions embedded in its porcelain skin. As she reached for the doll, she was once again enveloped in a vision. A young girl cradling the doll tightly, her expression a mix of joy and trepidation. The girl danced around the room, her laughter ringing out like music, while shadows lurked just beyond her reach. The young woman felt the innocence radiating from the girl, a beautiful juxtaposition against the darkness that threatened to encroach upon her world. But as the vision deepened, the laughter faltered. The shadows grew closer, whispering secrets that shattered the girl's joy. The young woman sensed the girl's fear and confusion, the burden of a reality that was beginning to overshadow her innocence. In this moment, she recognized the fragility of childhood, how easily joy could be tainted by the complexities of the adult world. With a heavy heart, she released the doll, placing it gently back on the shelf. The echoes of the past resonated within her, the weight of those memories pressing upon her spirit. It was clear that the stories contained within this room were a tapestry of light and dark, woven together in a delicate balance that mirrored the human experience. Exploring further, she noticed a trunk tucked away in the corner, its lid partially open as if inviting her to delve into its depths. She approached it cautiously, the air thick with anticipation. As she lifted the lid, a musty scent wafted out, mingling with the lingering aroma of lavender and dust. Inside, she discovered a collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon, their edges yellowed with age. With trembling fingers, she reached for them, untying the ribbon and unfolding the delicate sheets of paper. Each letter was a window into the past, filled with handwritten words that spoke of love and longing, of dreams shared and promises made. As she read through the letters, a story began to unfold, a tale of two lovers separated by circumstance, their hearts entwined despite the miles that lay between them. Each word dripped with emotion, the ink capturing the essence of their connection, the passion that burned brightly even in the face of adversity. Yet, as the letters progressed, a sense of unease crept in. The final letter, written in hurried script, bore the weight of desperation. The young woman could feel the fear and uncertainty pouring from the page, as if the writer had sensed that their love was teetering on the brink of collapse. In this moment, she understood that love was not always enough to conquer the challenges that life presented. The emotions echoed in her own heart, resonating with the complexities of her own relationships. Love was beautiful, yet it could also be a source of pain and heartache. She felt the weight of the unfulfilled promises that lingered in the air, a reminder that every connection came with its own set of challenges. With each letter, she could feel the shadows of the past intertwining with her present, the weight of the stories pulling her deeper into the heart of Maplewood House. As she placed the letters back into the trunk, she understood that these memories were not merely echoes of what had been. They were a part of her own journey, shaping her understanding of love and loss. As she stood amidst the remnants of the room, a chill swept through the air, sending shivers down her spine. The shadows began to deepen, coiling around her like a living entity, urging her to uncover the final piece of the puzzle. She could sense that there was more to this room, a secret waiting to be unveiled. Her gaze fell upon a small door nestled in the corner, partially hidden behind a tattered curtain. The door seemed to pulse with energy, a heartbeat of its own that beckoned her closer. Heart racing with anticipation, she approached, feeling the weight of the house's history pressing upon her. With a gentle push, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled downward into darkness. The air grew cooler, and the atmosphere shifted, enveloping her in a shroud of mystery. A sense of trepidation washed over her, but her determination pushed her forward. She needed to uncover the truth, the final chapter of the stories that had unfolded in this house. As she descended the stairs, the shadows clung to her, whispering secrets that were just beyond her reach. The dim light from above faded, and the darkness enveloped her like a thick fog, obscuring her path. With each step, she felt the weight of the house's memories pressing down, urging her to venture deeper into the unknown. At the bottom of the staircase, she found herself in a small chamber, the air thick with dust and silence. The walls were lined with shelves filled with forgotten items, old photographs, books with cracked spines, and trinkets that had once held meaning for those who had lived here. The atmosphere was heavy with history, and she could feel the spirits surrounding her, their presence palpable in the air. As she began to explore the room, a faint glow caught her eye. In the center of the chamber sat an ornate box, intricately carved and adorned with symbols she recognized from the pulsing symbol above. The box emanated a soft light, a beacon in the darkness, calling to her with an irresistible allure. With trembling hands, she reached for the box, her heart pounding in her chest. As she lifted the lid, a gentle breeze swept through the chamber, carrying with it the scent of blooming flowers. Inside, she discovered an array of delicate objects, each one a fragment of the house's history, a token of the lives that had intersected within these walls. Among the treasures lay a locket, its surface gleaming in the dim light. She picked it up, her fingers brushing against its cool surface, and as she opened it, a rush of memories flooded her mind. Images of a family, a mother, father, and child, flashed before her eyes, their laughter echoing like a distant melody. In that moment, she understood that this house was not just a collection of stories. It was a living tapestry woven from the threads of love, loss, and resilience. Each object held a piece of the past, a reminder that every life was interconnected, shaped by the choices made and the bonds formed. As she closed the locket, a sense of peace washed over her. The stories of Maplewood House were no longer just echoes in the darkness. They were a celebration of life, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who had come before her. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to honor their memories and share their tales with the world. With a final glance at the treasures before her, she turned to leave the chamber, her heart brimming with gratitude for the journey she had embarked upon. The shadows no longer felt threatening. Instead, they were companions in her quest to uncover the truth. As she ascended the staircase, she knew that the stories of Maplewood House were far from over. There were still layers to peel back, mysteries to unravel, and connections to forge. With each step, she carried the spirits of the past with her, determined to honor their legacy and breathe life into their forgotten tales. Emerging from the depths of the house, she felt the warmth of the sunlight wash over her, illuminating her path. The weight of the past had shifted, replaced by a sense of hope and purpose. Maplewood House was not just a repository of memories. It was a sanctuary for healing, a place where the stories of love, loss, and resilience would continue to echo for generations to come. Chapter 15: The Shattered Mirror. With a renewed sense of purpose, the young woman stepped out of the dim chamber, leaving behind the treasures of Maplewood House that had whispered secrets of love and loss into her heart. The sun's warmth wrapped around her like a comforting embrace, illuminating the way as she made her way back through the familiar halls, her mind swirling with thoughts of the stories she had yet to uncover. The light filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Each step echoed with the memories she had gleaned from the hidden room, the voices of the past calling her to listen, to share their narratives with the world beyond the walls of Maplewood. The significance of her role as a storyteller weighed heavily upon her, intertwining with the essence of the spirits that inhabited this place. As she entered the main hall, the atmosphere shifted, a subtle tension palpable in the air. The walls seemed to close in around her, holding their breath in anticipation. She paused, taking a moment to gather herself, the weight of the house's history pressing against her. It was as if she could feel the spirits gathering, their energies coalescing into a single force that urged her onward. Instinctively, she moved toward the grand staircase that spiraled upward, its ornate banister gleaming in the soft light. She felt drawn to the upper levels, where the air was thick with memories waiting to be explored. Each step creaked beneath her weight, resonating with the echoes of footsteps long since faded. Reaching the top, she paused on the landing, glancing around at the doors that lined the hallway. Each door was a threshold to a different story, and she felt the pull of something significant beyond one of them. A door at the end of the corridor, slightly ajar, revealing only a sliver of darkness beyond. Compelled by an unseen force, she approached, her heartbeat quickening as she reached for the handle. Pushing the door open, she stepped inside a small, dimly lit room. The air was cool and thick, a contrast to the warmth of the sunlit hallway. Dust motes floated in the beams of light that slipped through the window, illuminating the room in a soft, ethereal glow. It was a study, filled with towering bookshelves that bowed under the weight of time, each tome a vessel of knowledge and forgotten tales. In the center of the room stood a sturdy desk, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkpot, and a quill, as if someone had just stepped away from their writing. The young woman felt an inexplicable connection to this space, as if it had been preserved for her arrival. The scent of aged parchment filled the air, a comforting reminder of the stories waiting to be discovered. As she approached the desk, her gaze fell upon a pile of papers strewn haphazardly across the surface. Curious, she began to sift through them, her fingers gliding over the worn pages. Each paper revealed snippets of life, notes, sketches, and unfinished tales. It was clear that this had been a place of creativity, a sanctuary for thoughts that had long yearned to be expressed. One particular sheet caught her eye, the ink faded but legible. It bore the name Evelyn, and as she read the words pinned in a delicate hand, a vision unfolded in her mind. Evelyn was a young woman with a spirit as vibrant as the sun, a dreamer whose heart overflowed with stories waiting to be told. She had once sat at this very desk, pouring her heart onto the pages, seeking solace in the written word. As the young woman delved deeper into Evelyn's world, she sensed the weight of her dreams and the burdens she carried. Each sentence resonated with the struggles of an artist yearning for recognition in a world that often silenced the voices of women. The stories Evelyn had attempted to share reflected her passions, her fears, and the longing for connection that echoed throughout the ages. But alongside the hope, there was a palpable sadness woven into the fabric of her words. The young woman sensed the isolation that had crept into Evelyn's life, the feeling of being unheard and unseen. It was a familiar ache, one that mirrored her own struggles as she sought to carve out her place in the world, to find her voice amidst the cacophony of existence. With each note she read, the young woman felt a deepening empathy for Evelyn, a bond forged through shared experiences of longing and despair. She understood that the spirit of this room was not merely a remnant of the past. It was a testament to the resilience of those who had walked these halls, a reminder that their stories were worth telling. As she sifted through the papers, she discovered sketches that revealed Evelyn's dreams, images of far-off places, swirling galaxies, and fantastical creatures that danced across the page. These visions spoke of her desire for adventure and escape, for a life beyond the confines of Maplewood House. But the drawings also reflected the constraints imposed by societal expectations, a struggle between dreams and reality that resonated deeply within the young woman's own heart. Compelled by the depth of Evelyn's emotions, she felt an overwhelming urge to honor her legacy. She began to gather the papers, carefully arranging them into a cohesive narrative that would bring Evelyn's dreams to life. Each word became a thread woven into the tapestry of their shared experience, a bridge connecting the past to the present. In that moment, the room seemed to shimmer with energy, the spirits of the house converging around her in a swirling dance of light and shadow. The young woman closed her eyes, allowing herself to be enveloped by the warmth of their presence. She could feel their encouragement, the collective desire to share their stories with the world, urging her to continue. With renewed determination, she began to write, her hand moving swiftly across the pages as she poured her heart into the narrative. She recounted Evelyn's journey, her dreams, and her struggles, painting a vivid portrait of a woman who had fought against the tides of expectation. The ink flowed like a river, carrying the weight of emotions and the echoes of the past into the present. Hours slipped away as she wrote, the sun tracing its arc across the sky. In that timeless space, she felt a sense of liberation, as if each word released the burdens that had weighed on her heart. The spirits gathered around her, their energies intertwining with her own as they infused her writing with life. Finally, as she penned the last line, a profound stillness enveloped the room. She set the quill down and took a deep breath, the weight of the story settling within her like a gentle embrace. In that moment, she understood the power of storytelling, the ability to transcend time and space, to connect hearts across generations. As she sat back in the chair, a sense of fulfillment washed over her. She had become the vessel through which Evelyn's story would be shared, a beacon of hope for others who had felt silenced by the world. With a quiet smile, she looked around the study, feeling the lingering presence of the spirits who had guided her along this path. But the stillness was soon interrupted by a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. She turned to see a shimmering figure emerging from the shadows, the outline of a woman with long, flowing hair and eyes that sparkled with a light all their own. The young woman felt her breath catch in her throat as the spirit of Evelyn stepped closer, a gentle smile gracing her lips. In that moment, the young woman knew that she had not only honored Evelyn's memory, but had also forged a lasting connection with her spirit. The room vibrated with a shared understanding, a celebration of resilience and creativity that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Evelyn's spirit extended her hand, gesturing toward the open window, where the gentle breeze carried with it the promise of change. The young woman felt a rush of warmth, an affirmation that her journey was only beginning. She had opened the door to a world of stories, each waiting for someone to listen, to honor, and to share. With a heart full of gratitude, she rose from the desk, ready to embrace the adventure that lay ahead. Maplewood House was no longer a place of shadows. It had become a sanctuary for voices longing to be heard, a refuge for those seeking connection and understanding. As she stepped out of the study, the sunlight bathed her in warmth, illuminating her path as she continued to explore the house, eager to uncover the stories that awaited her. The echoes of the past would forever be intertwined with her own journey, and she was ready to carry their messages into the world beyond the walls of Maplewood House. Chapter 16. A Desperate Plea. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Maplewood House, casting a golden glow that danced along the polished floors. The young woman felt invigorated by the warmth and the stories she had woven into the fabric of her being. Evelyn's spirit lingered in the back of her mind, an ethereal presence that guided her as she moved through the house, each room pulsating with the energy of its own history. With her heart set on uncovering more of the tales hidden within Maplewood, she ventured into the expansive library, a haven filled with books that towered high above her. Each spine bore the weight of countless lives, whispering secrets that had long been tucked away in the recesses of time. She stepped cautiously among the rows of bookshelves, the scent of aged paper and ink filling her senses, grounding her in this sacred space. The library was a labyrinth of knowledge, where words had the power to transport her to distant realms and introduce her to characters who had shaped the very essence of humanity. She could spend hours here, lost in the pages of tales yet to be discovered, but today, her purpose was clear. She sought out the stories of those who had lived in Maplewood, tales that would reveal the interconnectedness of their lives and the shadows that danced in the corners of their existence. As she walked deeper into the library, she noticed a section that seemed slightly out of place. Nestled between volumes of poetry and history was a shelf that appeared older than the rest. Dust clung to the spines, and the titles were faded, barely legible. Intrigued, she reached for the first book, its cover worn and cracked, the texture rough beneath her fingertips. The title read, "Whispers of the Past." Opening the book, she was immediately enveloped in the rich, golden pages, the words leaping to life as they described the lives of the inhabitants of Maplewood House. The narratives unfolded like delicate petals, revealing the trials and triumphs of those who had come before her. Each tale was steeped in emotion, echoing the struggles that resonated through the ages. Love, betrayal, hope, and despair woven together like threads in a tapestry. As she turned the pages, she became entranced by the stories of the families who had called Maplewood home. There were tales of joy, such as the time a family celebrated the birth of a child, their laughter echoing through the halls like music. Then there were stories of loss, the grief that hung heavy in the air when loved ones were taken too soon, leaving behind empty chairs and unanswered questions. Each account was a reminder that the house had witnessed the spectrum of human experience, a silent observer of life's intricate dance. One story, in particular, caught her attention. It told of a young couple, Clara and Samuel, who had come to Maplewood in search of a fresh start. They were filled with dreams of building a life together, their hearts entwined with love and hope. The descriptions painted vivid images of their shared laughter, stolen glances, and plans for a future filled with possibility. But as the story unfolded, darkness crept into their lives. Clara fell ill, her once vibrant spirit dimming with each passing day. Samuel's devotion knew no bounds as he cared for her, but the weight of despair hung heavily upon him. The young woman could feel their pain, their love battling against the shadows that threatened to engulf them. She turned the pages with trembling hands, desperate to know how their story would end. Yet, as she reached the final chapter, a chill settled over her. The words grew faint, their ink smudged as if the sorrow had seeped into the pages. Clara succumbed to her illness, leaving Samuel heartbroken and alone in the once vibrant home they had shared. The young woman felt tears welling in her eyes, the weight of their love story pressing against her heart. In that moment, she understood that even the brightest joys could be tarnished by sorrow, and the fragility of life was a lesson learned through the ages. Closing the book gently, she sat in silence, her heart heavy with the echoes of Clara and Samuel's love. She realized that every story within Maplewood House was a thread in the intricate tapestry of human experience, a reminder of the joys and sorrows that defined existence. The shadows that danced in the corners were not merely specters of fear. They were the remnants of lives lived fully, each experience woven into the very fabric of the house. Determined to honor their memories, she sought out more books, more stories, eager to unravel the lives of those who had come before her. Each narrative revealed a different facet of the human experience, a glimpse into the dreams and struggles that shaped the lives within these walls. She lost herself in the library, time slipping away as she immersed herself in the richness of the past. Hours turned into days as she cataloged the stories she encountered, her heart swelling with empathy for those whose lives had intersected within Maplewood House. She understood that her own journey was merely a continuation of theirs, an echo of the past that resonated within her soul. She felt their presence guiding her, whispering encouragement as she pieced together their tales into a coherent narrative, a tribute to the lives that had once filled this house with laughter and love. With each story, she became more determined to share their legacies with the world. The idea of writing a book began to take shape in her mind, a collection of the stories of Maplewood House that would honor the spirits who had called it home. She envisioned the book filled with tales of love and loss, resilience and hope, stories that would connect with others and remind them of the beauty found within their own struggles. As she continued her research, she began to notice patterns emerging. The stories shared themes of connection, the bonds that tied individuals together despite the passage of time. She marveled at how the threads of love could weave their way through generations, creating an unbreakable tapestry of human experience. The realization filled her with a sense of purpose, a calling to become the voice of the forgotten, to illuminate the paths of those who had come before her. One afternoon, while sifting through a particularly dusty tome, she stumbled upon a faded photograph tucked between the pages. It depicted a gathering of people on the grand lawn of Maplewood House, laughter and joy radiating from the image. The young woman studied the faces, trying to grasp the lives encapsulated in that moment. A celebration of love, friendship, and community. A sense of nostalgia washed over her, as if the spirits of those captured in the photograph were reaching out to her, urging her to carry their stories into the world. With renewed vigor, she returned to her desk in the study, determined to write not just a collection of stories, but a living testament to the spirit of Maplewood House. She began to craft each tale, weaving them together like threads in a quilt, honoring the past while breathing new life into their narratives. The words flowed from her pen like a river, each sentence an offering to the spirits who had entrusted her with their stories. As dusk fell, she paused to look out the window, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. The world outside was alive with the colors of autumn, leaves dancing in the breeze. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey she had embarked upon, the connections she had forged with the spirits of Maplewood House. As the stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, she returned to her writing, her heart full of hope and purpose. The tapestry of shadows was becoming a tapestry of light, each story a beacon guiding her forward. She knew that the spirits of Maplewood would continue to walk beside her, their whispers echoing in her heart as she carried their legacies into the world. The path ahead was illuminated by their memories, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of love could guide the way. With every word she wrote, she felt the energy of the house pulse through her, an affirmation that her journey was only just beginning. She was ready to honor the past, share their stories, and weave a new narrative that would resonate for generations to come. Chapter 17. When time stopped. As dawn broke over Maplewood House, the young woman felt a renewed sense of energy coursing through her veins. The gentle light of the morning sun spilled into her room, casting a warm glow that enveloped her like a comforting blanket. It was a new day, brimming with possibilities, and she was eager to continue the work she had begun. After a quick breakfast, she returned to the library, the air thick with anticipation as she walked among the shelves. The stories she had uncovered thus far had ignited a fire within her, a desire to delve deeper into the lives of those who had walked these halls. Each narrative was a thread waiting to be woven into a larger tapestry, and she was determined to ensure that every tale found its rightful place. She took a seat at her desk, her fingers trembling slightly with excitement as she opened her notebook. With a deep breath, she focused on the stories she had yet to explore, the voices that still echoed in her mind. The spirits of Maplewood House had entrusted her with their narratives, and it was her responsibility to give them life. She began with a tale that had lingered in her thoughts, one that was tinged with both melancholy and hope. It spoke of Eliza, a woman who had lived in the house during a time when societal expectations weighed heavily on women's shoulders. The young woman could almost feel Eliza's spirit stirring in the air, urging her to share her story. As she penned the words, the scene began to unfold in her mind. Eliza was a woman of great intellect and passion, a keen observer of the world around her. She had dreams of traveling, of seeing the world beyond the confines of Maplewood House, but those dreams were often overshadowed by the expectations placed upon her by her family and society. The pressure to marry and conform was a constant weight on her shoulders, yet her heart longed for freedom and adventure. The young woman imagined Eliza standing at the window of her bedroom, gazing out at the sprawling landscape that surrounded the house. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills kissed by the morning sun, the distant trees swaying gently in the breeze. It was a beautiful world, yet one that felt just beyond her reach. As she wrote, she allowed herself to fully immerse in Eliza's experience, feeling the tension between duty and desire that defined her life. The young woman envisioned Eliza attending social gatherings, where she engaged in conversations that sparked her intellect but left her heart yearning for something more. Each event was a reminder of the constraints that held her captive, and the laughter of her peers felt like a distant echo. Despite the societal pressures, Eliza found solace in her love for literature. Books were her escape, portals to worlds where women could be adventurers, scholars, and leaders. In the quiet hours of the night, she would retreat to the library, her sanctuary, where she could immerse herself in the stories of women who had dared to break free from the chains of expectation. The young woman felt a surge of admiration for Eliza, recognizing her courage to dream in a world that often stifled such aspirations. Eliza's spirit resonated within her, reminding her of the importance of nurturing one's passions, even when the world seemed to conspire against them. As the day wore on, she continued to explore Eliza's journey. She wrote of the moment Eliza met a kindred spirit, a traveler who had come to Maplewood seeking refuge. His tales of adventure and exploration ignited a spark within her, and for the first time, she felt the intoxicating pull of possibility. The young woman imagined their conversations filled with laughter and longing, the electricity of newfound connection coursing through the air like a living entity. But as Eliza's heart began to open to the possibility of love, she felt the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her once more. The young woman knew that Eliza's story would not be without its challenges. Societal expectations were relentless. Eliza faced the dilemma of choosing between the life she had always known and the promise of something extraordinary. Hours passed as she captured Eliza's struggles on the page, each word a testament to her resilience. The young woman could almost feel Eliza's spirit guiding her, encouraging her to explore the depths of her emotions. She wrote of the moment Eliza made a decision, a choice that would alter the course of her life forever. As twilight descended upon Maplewood House, the young woman felt a stirring in the atmosphere, a soft whisper of energy that seemed to dance around her. The walls of the library resonated with the pulse of history, and she sensed the presence of Eliza, grateful for the homage being paid to her journey. The connection between the two women deepened, a bridge formed across time that allowed their spirits to intertwine. In that quiet space, the young woman closed her eyes and allowed herself to imagine the world beyond the confines of Maplewood. She envisioned Eliza standing on the precipice of adventure, her heart filled with both fear and excitement. With a deep breath, Eliza would step into the unknown, embracing the uncertainty with open arms. The young woman felt a rush of empowerment as she envisioned this moment of liberation, not just for Eliza, but for herself as well. She began to write with fervor, capturing the essence of Eliza's bravery as she took that first step into the world beyond Maplewood House. It was a step toward her dreams, a leap of faith that resonated through the ages. The young woman poured her heart into the narrative, each sentence imbued with the strength of women who had come before, women who had defied the odds and carved their own paths. With each word, she felt the power of storytelling coursing through her, reminding her that she was not alone. The spirits of Maplewood House stood beside her, a chorus of voices urging her to continue. She wrote until her fingers ached, her heart swelling with the knowledge that she was honoring Eliza's journey while also embracing her own. As the night deepened, the young woman placed her pen down and gazed out of the window. The moon hung high in the sky, its silvery light casting a magical glow over the landscape. She felt a sense of calm settle within her, the realization that she was part of something greater, an unbroken chain of stories that connected generations. Yet, beneath the surface of that calm, she sensed an undercurrent of urgency, an awareness that the stories she had yet to uncover were waiting to be told. With Eliza's journey now unfolding in her heart, she felt the pull of another narrative calling to her, beckoning her to explore the next thread in the tapestry of Maplewood House. Determined to heed the call, she made her way back to the shelves, her fingers gliding over the spines of the books. There were so many lives intertwined within the walls of the house, each waiting for someone to listen. She sought out another volume, this one embossed with golden letters that shimmered in the dim light. The title read, Shadows of Regret. Opening the book, she was met with a different energy, one that resonated with pain and longing. The story that unfolded within its pages was one of missed opportunities and unspoken words, a tale of a man named Thomas who had lived in Maplewood House during a tumultuous time. She felt a chill in the air as she began to read, sensing the weight of his regrets pressing down upon her. Thomas was a man haunted by the choices he had made, a shadow of the dreams he had once held dear. His story was one of longing, of love that had slipped through his fingers, leaving him with only memories and what-ifs. The young woman could feel the depth of his sorrow as she read, the weight of his unfulfilled desires echoing in her own heart. She delved into Thomas's past, exploring the moments that had shaped him. His youth had been filled with aspirations, dreams of travel, adventure, and a love that transcended time. But as the tides of life pulled him in different directions, those dreams had faded, overshadowed by responsibilities and the constraints of expectation. The young woman imagined Thomas standing at the edge of the estate, gazing out at the horizon, his heart heavy with the burden of his choices. She felt a sense of empathy wash over her, understanding that the shadows he carried were not unlike her own. The weight of regret was a universal experience, one that bound them together across the ages. As she continued to explore Thomas's journey, she could sense the spirit of his past lingering in the air, a palpable presence that enveloped her. The young woman realized that she was not merely a passive observer. She was an active participant in his narrative, a vessel through which his story would be shared. With each word she penned, she felt the urgency of Thomas's tale unfolding, a reminder that every choice carried the weight of consequence. She wrote of his longing for a lost love, the paths he had not taken, and the dreams that had slipped away like grains of sand. As the night deepened, she lost herself in the raw emotion of Thomas's experiences. The shadows of regret became a mirror reflecting her own fears and desires, urging her to confront the choices that had shaped her life. The stories she had uncovered thus far had opened her eyes to the richness of human experience, the interplay between light and dark, joy and sorrow. With the moon illuminating the pages, she continued to write, determined to honor Thomas's journey with the same reverence she had shown Eliza. His story was one of redemption, a reminder that even in the depths of regret, there existed the possibility of healing and growth. As dawn approached once more, she set her pen down, her heart full of gratitude for the narratives she had encountered. The tapestry of Maplewood House was becoming clearer, each thread woven with care and purpose. She felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she was not just telling stories but preserving the legacies of those who had come before her. With the sun beginning to rise, she glanced out the window, the sky painted with hues of orange and pink. The world outside was waking up, and she felt a surge of determination. There were still more stories to uncover, more lives to honor, and she was ready to continue her journey. The spirits of Maplewood House surrounded her, guiding her as she ventured further into the depths of their stories. She knew that each narrative would lead her closer to understanding the intricate web of human connection, the shadows and light that danced within each life. With a heart full of purpose, She opened her notebook once again, eager to capture the next chapter in the unfolding saga of Maplewood House. The past was alive within her, and she was determined to honor it with every word she wrote. Chapter 18. The Host and the Haunt. The morning sun streamed into Maplewood House, illuminating the library with a golden hue. The young woman sat at her desk, her heart still heavy with the weight of Thomas's regrets and the poignant beauty of Eliza's aspirations. The stories were intertwined, each reflecting the complexities of love and loss, dreams and disappointments. She felt the echo of their lives resonating within her, urging her to continue the exploration of the souls who had once inhabited these walls. With a deep breath, she opened her notebook, ready to embark on the next chapter of her journey. The day ahead was imbued with a sense of urgency, a calling to uncover another story that had been waiting patiently to be told. She felt the spirits of Maplewood House hovering nearby, guiding her toward the next thread in the tapestry of narratives that surrounded her. She turned her attention to a dusty book that had caught her eye the day before. Its leather cover was worn, the title nearly faded beyond recognition. As she carefully opened the cover, a rush of cool air enveloped her, sending a shiver down her spine. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with the delicate script of a woman named Clara. Clara's life unfolded on the pages, a story that seemed to shimmer with both warmth and sadness. She was a gentle spirit, a caretaker of dreams who had lived in the house during the early years of its existence. Clara had dedicated herself to nurturing the garden that surrounded Maplewood, a place that thrived under her loving hands. It was not just a garden. It was a sanctuary where she sought solace amidst the challenges of her time. The young woman could visualize Clara tending to the flowers, her fingers deftly coaxing life from the soil. Each petal was a whisper of hope, a testament to Clara's unwavering belief in the beauty of the world. She wrote of the scents that filled the air, the heady perfume of roses, the fresh notes of lavender, and the earthy fragrance of damp soil. Clara had poured her heart into the garden, nurturing it as if it were an extension of her own soul. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the young woman allowed herself to become immersed in Clara's story. She could almost hear the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hum of bees buzzing about their work. Clara had a profound connection to nature, finding peace in the simple act of planting seeds and watching them grow. It was in the garden that Clara found her voice, a language that transcended words and spoke directly to the heart. In her youth, Clara had dreams of becoming an artist. She would often sketch the flowers she tended, capturing their fleeting beauty on paper. The young woman imagined Clara sitting in the garden, her sketchbook resting on her lap as she poured her heart into her art. Each stroke of her pencil was an act of love, a tribute to the vibrant life surrounding her. But life had other plans for Clara. As she blossomed into adulthood, the weight of societal expectations began to press down upon her. The world outside her garden beckoned with promises of marriage and stability, but Clara's heart ached for something more, something that seemed forever out of reach. The tension between her dreams and reality began to unravel the threads of her spirit. The young woman could feel Clara's struggle as she grappled with the choices laid before her. She wrote of the moments when Clara felt torn between duty and desire, her heart yearning for artistic freedom even as her family urged her toward a conventional life. The garden became her refuge, a place where she could escape the suffocating constraints of expectation. Clara found solace in the small moments, sunlight filtering through leaves, the laughter of children playing nearby, the gentle touch of a summer breeze. Each day in the garden was a reminder of her dreams, a spark of inspiration that fueled her creative spirit. Yet, as the seasons changed, Clara felt the weight of her unfulfilled aspirations pressing down upon her. Days turned into months, and the young woman could sense Clara's growing restlessness. The garden that had once brought her joy began to feel like a prison, the vibrant blooms a bittersweet reminder of what could have been. The colors faded in the young woman's mind, replaced by shades of gray as Clara's spirit dimmed under the weight of her choices. Amidst this turmoil, a chance encounter would alter the course of Clara's life forever. The young woman envisioned a warm summer day when Clara met a wandering artist, a man whose passion for life mirrored her own. Their eyes locked across the garden, a silent understanding passing between them. In that fleeting moment, Clara felt the spark of hope ignite within her once more. The artist began to visit frequently, drawn to the beauty of Clara's garden and the warmth of her spirit. They shared unspoken conversations, each glance filled with longing and understanding. The young woman could feel the electricity in the air, the connection between Clara and the artist weaving a thread of possibility through the garden's flowers. Yet, as their bond deepened, Clara found herself at a crossroads. The allure of artistic freedom beckoned her, but the weight of family obligations loomed large. She could almost hear the whispers of her loved ones, urging her to choose the safe path. The conflict within her grew more intense, and the garden, once a sanctuary, became a battleground for her heart. The young woman wrote with fervor, capturing the tumult of Clara's emotions as she struggled to navigate the turbulent waters of love and duty. Each stroke of her pen was infused with the pain of a soul torn between two worlds. Clara's dreams danced just out of reach, a tantalizing whisper that urged her to take a leap of faith. As summer gave way to autumn, the garden began to transform, the vibrant colors of summer fading into rich hues of orange and gold. The young woman could see Clara's spirit reflecting the changing seasons, a blend of hope and melancholy as she grappled with her choices. The artist remained a constant presence, a reminder of what could be, yet the weight of her obligations pressed heavily upon her heart. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara stood at the edge of her garden, watching as the last rays of light bathed the world in a warm glow. It was a moment of clarity, a fleeting glimpse of the life she yearned for. She could almost feel the artist's presence beside her, the air thick with unspoken words and shared dreams. In that moment, Clara made a decision. With the last light of day illuminating her path, she would choose to follow her heart, to embrace the dreams that had long been stifled. The young woman could see Clara stepping forward, leaving the weight of her past behind as she ventured into the unknown. It was a leap of faith, a moment of liberation that resonated through the ages. As Clara crossed the threshold of the garden, the young woman felt a surge of emotion wash over her. She understood the significance of this choice, not just for Clara, but for all those who had come before her. The act of choosing one's own path was a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even amidst the shadows of doubt, hope could flourish. With a sense of determination, the young woman continued to write, capturing the essence of Clara's journey as she ventured into a new chapter of her life. She wove together the threads of love, passion, and courage, painting a vivid picture of a woman who dared to follow her heart. As night fell over Maplewood House, the young woman felt the weight of the stories she had uncovered settle within her. Each narrative had contributed to her understanding of the human experience, a tapestry of emotions that connected the past to the present. Clara's journey was not just her own. It was a reflection of the resilience that resided within every person who had ever dared to dream. With the moon casting a gentle light through the library window, she closed her notebook, her heart full of gratitude for the spirits of Maplewood House who had entrusted her with their stories. She knew that the echoes of time would continue to resonate within her, guiding her as she ventured further into the depths of their narratives. As the stars twinkled in the night sky, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The stories of Eliza, Thomas, and Clara had come together to form a powerful mosaic of human experience, and she was honored to be their storyteller. With each passing day, she would continue to explore the threads of their lives, unearthing the wisdom hidden within the pages of history. And so, with a heart full of purpose, she embraced the journey ahead, ready to honor the spirits of Maplewood House and the stories they had yet to share. Chapter 19. A Bargain with Shadows. The following day dawned crisp and clear, the sunlight filtering through the trees surrounding Maplewood House like a gentle caress. The young woman awoke with a renewed sense of purpose, her heart still brimming with Clara's story and the courage it had ignited within her. As she prepared for the day, she felt the spirits of the house swirling around her, as if urging her to delve deeper into the mysteries that awaited her. The garden, a living testament to Clara's dreams, beckoned to her from the window. She could almost hear its whispers, the rustling leaves sharing secrets of resilience and hope. Today, she decided, she would immerse herself in the very heart of the garden, a place that had witnessed the evolution of Clara's spirit and the lives of those who had come before. Stepping outside, she was enveloped by the fragrant air, the scent of blooming flowers mingling with the earthiness of freshly turned soil. The vibrant colors of the garden danced before her, a kaleidoscope of life that reflected the joy and sorrow of its caretaker. Each flower was a testament to Clara's dedication, a reminder of the love she had poured into this sanctuary. As she walked along the winding paths, she couldn't help but notice how the garden seemed to echo Clara's journey. The roses, with their delicate petals unfurling in the sunlight, whispered of passion and desire. The sunflowers, standing tall and proud, exuded strength and resilience, while the fragile daisies represented innocence and hope. Each bloom told a story, a fragment of the intricate tapestry woven through the years. She knelt beside a cluster of lavender, its soothing aroma filling her senses as she ran her fingers through the soft stems. Clara had often found peace amidst the lavender, using its calming properties to soothe her restless spirit. The young woman could almost envision Clara gathering the fragrant blossoms, their essence captured in her sketches, a celebration of nature's beauty. In that moment, she felt a connection to the past, a thread linking her to Clara's essence. Inspired, the young woman pulled out her notebook and began to write, allowing the garden's energy to flow through her. With each word, she captured the essence of the flowers, the emotions they evoked, and the lessons they imparted. The garden was not just a backdrop for Clara's life. It was a living, breathing entity, a character in its own right that had played a pivotal role in shaping her journey. As she wrote, she pondered the choices Clara had made, the sacrifices that had defined her life. Clara's story was a reminder that the heart of a dreamer often beats in harmony with the rhythm of nature. The young woman realized that Clara had not only tended to the garden, but had also nurtured her own dreams within its confines. The garden had served as a safe haven, a place where she could explore her creativity without the constraints of the outside world. Hours slipped away as she became lost in her thoughts, the sun slowly tracing its path across the sky. In that sacred space, she felt the weight of Clara's hopes and regrets, the dreams that had flourished alongside the flowers. The young woman knew she was merely a steward of these stories, tasked with preserving the legacies of those who had come before her. Her attention was suddenly drawn to a patch of soil at the far end of the garden, where Clara had once planted a wildflower garden, a space that had become overgrown with weeds over time. The vibrant colors of the wildflowers had faded into memory, replaced by the invasive green of neglect. The young woman felt a pang of sorrow for this forgotten corner, a place that had once been a riot of colors and life. Driven by an impulse to restore the wildflower garden, she gathered her tools and set to work, digging into the soil with determination. Each weed she uprooted seemed to release a sigh of relief, as if the garden itself was awakening from a long slumber. As she labored, She felt a sense of connection to Clara, as if the very essence of her spirit guided her hands. With every shovel of earth, the young woman unearthed remnants of the past, fragments of roots from wildflowers that had once thrived, hidden beneath the surface. She could almost see Clara's vision come to life, the vibrant blossoms dancing in the breeze, a celebration of nature's untamed beauty. The garden was not merely a collection of flowers. It was a reflection of the dreams that had flourished and faded, a canvas painted with the colors of life. As she worked, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the garden. The golden hour bathed everything in a soft light, creating an ethereal atmosphere that felt almost magical. The young woman paused for a moment, wiping the sweat from her brow, and took in the beauty around her. She was reminded of the importance of nurturing not only the garden, but also the dreams that lay dormant within her own heart. After hours of labor, the wildflower garden began to take shape. The young woman carefully sowed seeds, envisioning the vibrant blooms that would soon emerge from the earth. With each seed she planted, she felt a sense of hope, an affirmation that, like Clara, she could also cultivate her dreams. The garden was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that life could bloom anew, even in the most unexpected places. As the last light of day faded, she stepped back to admire her work. The wildflower garden, once a forgotten corner of Maplewood, now held the promise of rebirth. The young woman felt a surge of satisfaction wash over her, knowing she had honored Clara's legacy by breathing new life into the space that had once been filled with dreams. The evening air cooled around her, and she gathered her tools, feeling a sense of fulfillment that transcended the physical labor. As she made her way back toward the house, she glanced back at the garden, a sense of peace settling within her. The spirits of Maplewood House seemed to dance among the flowers, their presence palpable, as if they were celebrating the renewal of their sacred space. Inside the house, she set her tools aside and opened her notebook, eager to capture the day's events. The act of writing became a form of catharsis, a way to channel her emotions and solidify her connection to Clara and the other spirits of Maplewood. With each word, she honored the journey of those who had come before her, weaving their stories into the fabric of her own life. The night deepened around her, and she could feel the weight of the stories waiting to be told. The garden was alive with possibilities, and she understood that her journey was only just beginning. Each chapter she wrote was a step toward unraveling the intricate tapestry of lives that had intertwined within Maplewood House. As she penned the final words of the chapter, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The garden had gifted her with more than just a story. It had bestowed upon her a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that dreams, like flowers, could bloom even in the darkest of times. The spirits of Maplewood House surrounded her, their whispers echoing through the night, encouraging her to continue her exploration of their lives. In that sacred space, she understood that the heart of the garden beat in tandem with her own, a reflection of the human experience, fragile, beautiful, and endlessly resilient. With a heart full of hope, she closed her notebook, ready to embrace whatever story awaited her next. Chapter 20: The Final Night. The dawn of a new day arrived with a soft haze that enveloped Maplewood House, the air tinged with the fragrant aroma of damp earth and blooming flowers. The young woman awoke with a sense of anticipation, her heart racing at the thought of what lay ahead. She had felt the stirrings of something profound within her, a whisper from the spirits of the house urging her to uncover the final threads of their stories. As she rose from her slumber, memories of Clara, Thomas, and Eliza flooded her mind, weaving together like strands of a delicate tapestry. Each soul had left a mark on her heart, their hopes and regrets resonating within her. Today, she would honor their legacies, not just through writing but by embodying the very essence of their dreams. After breakfast, she stepped outside, her feet finding their way to the garden, now a vibrant sanctuary filled with life. The wildflower garden she had cultivated was beginning to bloom, colorful petals unfurling like joyful greetings to the sun. She knelt among the flowers, her fingers brushing against their soft surfaces, feeling a connection to Clara's spirit that was stronger than ever. The young woman felt compelled to spend the day in the garden, tending to the flowers, pulling weeds, and watering the delicate blooms. Each task became a ritual, a way of honoring Clara's memory and the love she had poured into this sacred space. As she worked, she could hear the whispers of the past echoing through the petals, stories of resilience and hope swirling around her like the gentle breeze. With every flower that blossomed under her care, she felt the weight of their histories. The roses carried the passionate tales of love, their vibrant hues a reflection of the emotions that had once filled these grounds. The daisies, with their cheerful faces, spoke of innocence and the laughter of children who had played in the garden long ago. The sunflowers, reaching for the sky, embodied the strength that had been nurtured in this very soil. As the sun rose higher, the young woman took a moment to pause, allowing herself to be enveloped by the garden's energy. She closed her eyes and breathed in the scents that surrounded her, the sweet fragrance of nectar and the crispness of morning dew. In that moment of stillness, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over her, a deep appreciation for the spirits who had entrusted her with their stories. Inspired, she retrieved her notebook and began to write, not about the stories she had uncovered, but about her own journey, a journey intertwined with the lives of those who had come before her. She penned her thoughts about Clara's passion for life, Thomas's struggles, and Eliza's unwavering spirit. It became clear to her that their stories were not just echoes of the past. They were threads woven into her own life, shaping who she had become. Hours slipped away as she poured her heart onto the pages, her words flowing effortlessly as if guided by an unseen hand. She wrote of her dreams, the seeds she wished to plant in her own life, and the courage to nurture them despite the obstacles that lay ahead. With each stroke of the pen, she reaffirmed her commitment to following her heart, just as Clara had done in her own time. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the garden, the young woman felt a sense of completion wash over her. She knew this day marked a pivotal moment in her journey, a convergence of past and present, of dreams and realities. The garden had served as a catalyst for her own transformation, a place where she could explore the depths of her soul. With her notebook filled with reflections and gratitude, she stood and surveyed the garden one last time. The flowers danced gently in the evening breeze, their colors vibrant against the backdrop of the setting sun. She felt a surge of energy, a palpable connection to the spirits who had once roamed these grounds. It was as if they were standing beside her, celebrating this moment of unity. In that sacred space, the young woman knew that she had become more than just a storyteller. She had become a guardian of the dreams that flourished within Maplewood House. She had woven together the threads of Clara's aspirations, Thomas's regrets, and Eliza's hopes into a tapestry that celebrated the human experience in all its complexity. As night fell, she lit a lantern in the garden, its warm glow illuminating the flowers and casting soft shadows on the ground. The light flickered like the spirits of Maplewood House, a beacon of hope and resilience that would guide her as she ventured into the unknown. She understood that the garden, once a place of solitude, had transformed into a sanctuary of dreams, a living testament to the power of love, loss, and the courage to pursue one's passions. With a heart full of determination, the young woman stepped back from the garden, knowing that her journey was far from over. The stories of Maplewood House would continue to resonate within her, guiding her toward new adventures and uncharted territories. She felt the weight of their legacies settle comfortably in her soul, a reminder that she was not alone in her quest. As the moon rose high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the landscape, she turned to face Maplewood House. The house stood proud and resilient, its walls echoing the laughter and tears of generations past. She could almost hear the whispers of Clara, Thomas, and Eliza, urging her to carry their stories forward, to keep their dreams alive in her heart. With one last glance at the garden, she made a silent promise to herself and to the spirits that had guided her. She would nurture her dreams as fiercely as Clara had tended to her flowers, allowing them to blossom and flourish. The garden was no longer just a collection of plants. It was a symbol of hope, a reflection of the beauty that could emerge from even the darkest of times. As she turned away from the garden, she felt the weight of the past transform into a lightness of being. Each step she took was filled with purpose, a determination to embrace her own story while honoring those who had come before her. The night air wrapped around her like a comforting embrace, and she felt the spirits of Maplewood House lingering nearby, their presence a reminder that the journey of storytelling was a sacred one. The young woman understood that her role was not only to tell the stories of Clara, Thomas, and Eliza, but to weave her own narrative into the fabric of their legacies. The echoes of their lives would resonate within her, guiding her as she continued to explore the world and the stories that awaited her. With the lantern's warm glow illuminating her path, she walked back toward Maplewood House, ready to embrace whatever came next. The garden, with its vibrant blooms and whispers of the past, would always hold a special place in her heart, a reminder that dreams could flourish in the light of love, and that every story, no matter how small, was worth telling. And so, with her heart open to the possibilities that lay ahead, she stepped into the future, ready to write the next chapter of her own extraordinary journey.